Okay, thank you. My clock says 2 o'clock as well, Karen. So I think now that we're recording, we can officially get the meeting started. So I'll call the meeting to order, and I'd like to just start off by wishing everyone a happy new year and welcoming all to our first meeting of 2022. I'm still not used to saying that. The first thing on our agenda will be of course, to adopt the agenda. So I have a recommendation here that the agenda for the January 10th, 2022 regular meeting of the council be accepted and passed. Could I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by Steve, seconded by Sherry. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. I have none to declare on anything related to today's agenda. Councillor Hearn?
No.
Councillor Burke?
No.
Okay, Councillor Yake?
No.
And Councillor McCabe?
I have none.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a number of presentations on this afternoon's agenda. First up, we have the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, and I'll just pass it over briefly to our representative on the Conservation Authority, Councillor McCabe, to do introductions. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Stevens. She's the general manager of the SVCA, and it will be almost 2 years this June, I believe, that she has been the general manager, and she came in at a kind of a turbulent time. I think I've only met her maybe 3 times in person in the last year and a half. She's been doing a wonderful job and getting us through some tumultuous times, especially with staff being trying to be on the road and trying to be present on properties within the watershed. And so I welcome her. We've had a great year this far, and yeah, I'm looking forward to her presenting the budget. So welcome, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Ms. Wallace, did you want to show my presentation, or should I?
I can do it if you want. You can just tell me when now I had Laura Molson, but I don't see her.
She's not here. No.
Okay, all right. Here we go.
And I believe it's on page 26. 2 down, but the other way. 24 maybe? There, 25.
25. Okay, thank you.
Right in the middle. So thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm going to speak to you about some of the programs and services supported by Municipal Levy at Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. And then I will provide some budgetary numbers proposed for 2022. Lastly, I will provide you with some provincial updates, which will impact not only our conservation authority, but all conservation authorities in the province, but also our watershed municipalities. Next slide, please. Our story of conservation begins in the rural watersheds of Ontario, where deforestation for agricultural land uses led to erosion, allowing runoff and flooding, as well as drought. Conservation organizations came together to address the environmental conditions at the time, and the result was the Conservation Authorities Act, which was passed in 1946, with a mandate to conserve, restore, and develop natural resources of the watershed. Next slide, please. The key to conservation authorities being able to do the work we do is at the watershed focus, transcending municipal boundaries and potentially different opinions. This makes us a unique entity in Ontario. Good land management equals good water management, and one cannot happen without the other. Next slide, please. Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority's overall flood management program encompasses both non-structural approaches designed to keep people away from water and structural approaches which are designed to keep water away from people. One of the elements of the flood management program is the flood forecasting and warning program. The Flood Forecasting and Warning Program relays routine information concerning watershed river conditions to select agencies and municipal officials. It also provides rapid advance warning and technical support to concerned officials and to citizens whose lives and properties may be endangered by floodwaters. Revenue sources for this department are budgeted to be from the general levy at 80% and from a provincial grant at 20%. Next slide, please. Through the Environmental Planning and Regulations Department, Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority protects the people from the environment and the environment from the people. The authority ensures that the natural environment and natural hazards are respected, protected, avoided, and or accommodated through our regulation under the Conservation Authorities Act, where permits are reviewed and issued for development taking place in vulnerable areas within our watershed. General levy, as well as revenue from non-levy sources, will support this department in 2022. Next slide, please. The purpose of our water quality department is to establish baseline water quality data, to observe trends in water quality, and to assess the effectiveness of watershed programs. To do so, we conduct groundwater, surface water, and biomonitoring samples to help characterize the status of water resources in the Saugeen Valley watershed. This department is fully funded by municipal levy. Next slide, please. Are we advancing? Just seeing. Oh,
I'm just having a little bit of trouble. Just a minute. Let me start this again from where we were. Sorry about that.
no problem.
Okay, let me catch up.
And next slide. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that.
Not at all. The structural approaches of the flood management program are about keeping people away from the water. These structures include dams used to control this flow of frazzle ice, dikes to restrict flows to the proper channels, and channel works to protect slopes from erosion. Existing flood and erosion control infrastructure is inspected annually to ensure their integrity in fulfilling one of their key mandates. These include the prevention of loss of life, property damage, and social disruption from flood and erosion processes. The Water Management Department is funded by general levy and by special levy to benefiting municipalities. Next slide, please. Environmental stewardship refers to efforts made to protect the environment and to identify and mitigate the potential environmental repercussions of an activity. SVCA's programs and services in stewardship extend to community support and partnerships such as tree planting or project funding support. For example, the authority has recently partnered with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization to create a water well improvement program intended to protect groundwater aquifers across the watershed. And lastly, we continue to maintain and improve outreach to the agricultural community. Next slide, please. We also continue to provide extensive conservation education programming. We assist in the organization of regional events such as the Forest and Water Festivals, carry out local outreach such as the Yellowfish Road program, and conduct our very own educational programming. The authority assists watershed residents in acquiring the knowledge, skills, and commitment needed to make informed decisions. Funding in this department is approximately 65% from general levy and the balance from various program users and from Bruce Power. The general levy required to fund this department is similar to that which was used in 2021. Next slide, please. Our Forestry and Lands Department offers three main forestry-related programs and services. The first is our tree planting program. The second is our tree marking and tendering program. And the third is our managed forest tax incentive program, which provides for authority properties and private landowners to develop managed forest management plans, on their properties. As well, we have maintenance and improvement projects which take place on our authority forested properties in the amount of 8,000 hectares. The revenue sources in this department is derived exclusively from the sale of forest products from authority-owned properties and from services provided to landowners such as tree sales, tree spraying, and forest management. Next slide, please. The parks covered by this portion of the budget include mostly our conservation areas, which are open to the public. Annual revenue sources other than general levy are from agreements with, for example, the Ontario Steelheaders Association for Denny's Dam CA, West Grey for the Durham CA day use swimming area, and a rental house at Sulphur Spring Conservation Area. In addition, we have in 2021, we obtained revenue from parking fees at 2 parks and from water donations at Sulphur Spring Conservation Area. In 2002, we will be expanding our parking revenue from 2 additional parking locations. Next slide, please. This slide provides our 2022 budget at a glance. You'll note that the increase in the budget is approximately $400,000 or just shy of $400,000. To minimize the amount of general levy and the amount of money that we are requesting of our municipalities, we are drawing over $246,000 from our reserves to offset the cost to our municipalities. And therefore, in terms of what it means for your municipality, the 2022 municipal levy will be increased by $4,172, which will be equivalent to $73,997, which, if we draw in comparison to your own municipal levy, is equivalent to a 0.080 increase in your municipal levy. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, there are just a few slides that I do want to provide to you to show you a little bit of an update of what is happening provincially. Next slide, please. I next want to move on to briefly describe the Phase 1 Conservation Authority Act regulations that were released in October of last year. The Mandatory Programs and Services Regulation outlines mandatory programs and services to be delivered by a conservation authority under specific categories, including natural hazards, conservation lands, source protection, provincial water quality and quantity monitoring, and core watershed-based resource management strategies. Category 1 programs and services are required to be delivered and are eligible for general municipal levy. Anything not included as a mandatory program and service could be delivered as a municipal Category 2 or as an other Category 3 program and service. Right now, Conservation Authority staff across the province are creating an inventory of all the programs and services they offer and are splitting all of the programs and services they offer into 3 different groups: Category 1, Category 2, and Category 3 programs and services. Next slide, please. A list of all Category 1 mandatory, Category 2 municipal, and Category 3 other programs and services the authority is providing and intends to provide, including estimates of the total annual cost for delivery and sources of funding and where agreements are necessary, is required to be delivered to the province by February 28th, 2022. It is also required to circulate that document to each municipality in the watershed and to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Another deadline that has recently passed is the delivery of the transition plan, which was due to the province on December 31st, 2021. That document required each conservation authority to outline how it was going to complete all of the necessary actions between essentially October 2021 and January 1st, 2024, which is the end of the transition date. And that document has been circulated to your municipality. Next slide, please. I just wanted to, I'm finishing off, draw to your attention that we've recently rebranded with a new logo that brings to your attention the river, and that comes into Lake Huron with the infamous Lake Huron sunset, and of course our magnificent trees in our watershed. Next slide, please. We've also created a brand new website which offers answers to a number of questions. And if there is anything that is of interest to you, I would encourage you to take a look at our website. And if there are any questions that are not answered, there is an opportunity to ask the expert. So I'd encourage you to do that. And next slide, please. I'll finish this presentation by thanking you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Just see if any council members have any questions they'd like to ask. If you could just hang on for that, that'd be great.
No problem.
Any questions for Jennifer this afternoon?
I don't have any. I've been through this with her already, so I'm good.
Thanks, Steve. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Mike, go ahead.
Mayor Lennox, if there are no questions from council, Jennifer, just had two questions, and they're probably geared more towards looking at transition plans and things of that nature as opposed to the budget. So appreciate the information on the budget. You refer in your slides to non-revenue parks. Is that just the way parks and the like have been established by the Conservation Authority, or is that a requirement that they are kind of revenue neutral? Is there something that requires that, and is that something that you guys are considering as you're moving forward with transition plans?
Thank you very much for the question, and through you, Mayor Lennox, we consider our conservation areas non-revenue simply because we do not charge for the use of those parks. Other conservation authorities do charge for the use of their conservation areas. We are one of the few that does not do that. The most that we request is on the honor system that you pay for parking. And we have been able to, as I mentioned during the presentation, obtain some funds through that mechanism, but we are not looking at making those parks revenue or charging for the use of those parks, because we believe that it's quite important for the public to have access to those parks, and the public is already paying for the use of those parks through the municipal levy that's provided to the Conservation Authority through the municipalities.
Okay, Steve? You're muted, by the way, Steve.
Yeah, sorry, just piggybacking on what excuse me, Jennifer has said. That's one of the great things about the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. It's open year round. The trails are open to snowmobilers and all year round, and that's kind of one of the issues that we have with the GRCA as well. So that's a great contribution that the SVCA gives back to the municipalities that are members. And like she said, we as taxpayers pay for that and should have access to it. So thank you for that, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Other questions, comments from council? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So thank you, Jennifer, again for your presentation and joining us this afternoon. I'll let you get back to the rest of your busy day. I'm sure you have many other things on the go.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lennox. It was my pleasure. Have a good day.
Great, thank you. Okay, next up, we have another presentation, this time from Safe Communities Wellington County. There's Christine. Hi, Christine. Welcome. And with that, just an update on the safety and well-being plan this afternoon. So I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, Christine.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try and share my screen, but if not, Karen, I might need your help. So we will see. Oh, share screen. No, I seem to be having issues with sharing my screen, Karen. Can you pull
Okay.
it up for me?
Mhm. Is that up there?
That's awesome. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Oh,
Perfect. I'll let you know that there's not a lot of changing anyway, but I'll let you know what page to flip it to.
okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Lennox and esteemed councillors for giving Safe Communities Wellington County the opportunity to address you regarding the community safety and well-being plan. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Christine Veet, the program coordinator for Safe Communities Wellington County. Before I get into any details about the plan, I want to give you a quick refresher on Safe Communities Wellington County. I'm the designated administration person for Safe Communities Wellington County. I've had the privilege to work with many different people and organizations throughout my years with Safe Communities. Going forward in 2022, our new co-chairs are Staff Sergeant Stephen Thomas, who has been voted in for a 2-year term, and Angel Abel, the chair of the Safe Communities Committee in the town of Minto, who has 1 year left in her term. Our executive also includes a representative from Guelph Wellington Paramedic Services, Chief Stephen Dewar, a representative from Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health, Anna Vanderland, Wellington County Councillor Campbell Cork, Wellington County OPP Inspector Paul Richardson, and new to our executive, Kate Cobies, Wellington Healthcare Alliance. Now on to the plan. Just to review, the Ministry of the Solicitor General mandated all municipalities to create their own community safety and well-being plan. Wellington County, through Safe Communities Wellington County, was able to create and complete the community safety and well-being plan for Wellington County that encompasses all of the municipalities. All municipalities agreed to support Safe Communities in the process of creating the community safety and well-being plan. And for that, I thank you. Now on to the real work. The framework, as was mentioned in our previous presentation, is intended to be holistic and requires planning at all levels. Community safety and well-being planning is a collaborative process to ensure that services are working together. As I've already mentioned, our executive alone is made up of residents, municipal council, emergency services, the County of Wellington, Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health, and our hospital network, which is amazing. Adding to our executive, our leadership table includes representatives from family health teams, education, not-for-profits, and businesses throughout Wellington County, as well as municipalities. I hope you've had the opportunity to look at the plan that has been completed. And might I add, we ended up meeting the deadline, it's actually exceeding it prior, like we actually submitted the community safety and well-being plan prior to the July 1st, 2021 deadline. I'm only coming to you now because I was optimistic that we might see you in person. But alas, we are not. So the community safety and well-being plan was designed to be a strategic document written at a macro level to allow interchangeability based on the fluid needs and priorities of each municipality. Consider the plan as a guideline and a place to start to improve safety and well-being in the Township of Wellington North. So what do we need you to do? Okay, so if we can flip to page, I think it's 7 or 8. Karen? Yeah, right there. That's perfect.
This one?
So yeah, that's exactly where it is. So as you can see, on this page, we have statistics. And if you flip to the next page, Karen, we have information about the priority setting exercise. And then if you keep on going, it's like the listing of priorities that need to be addressed.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was all the priority setting exercise. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, so here we go. So these are the priorities that needed to be addressed through the leadership table and each municipality. We need every single municipality to either have a Safe Communities group or have constant representation on the leadership table to ensure each municipality is participating in to again improve community safety and well-being within their municipality. Over the last year, thanks to Karen Wallace, Wellington North has been represented very well. Now, here comes a little bit of work. Each municipality is required to provide an annual update to the Safe Communities Leadership Table that will be in line with the calendar year. Now, don't worry, Karen, you're not on the hook until December 2022 to complete yours. I will provide you with a template well in advance of you having to submit. Here's the good news, and we've already discussed this. Well, originally we thought there would be drastic differences in the priorities for each municipality. There actually wasn't. But that definitely does not mean that every municipality will have the same strategies. What we decide to do at a county level may be different from what you want to do. And we want to make sure that each municipality shines to show the extraordinary strategies you've put in place and who you've partnered with to keep your municipality safe and well. Just like the previous presentation through Saugeen Valley, right? Conservation Authority. Other municipalities are in the Grand River watershed. So you're partnering with different organizations as well to keep your municipality safe. What success will look like? The goal of the municipality is to mitigate situations of elevated risk, proactively identify those risks, then promote and support programs that achieve successful outcomes. Wow, those are a lot of words. And this brings us to the model once again. So we're going to revisit that model that we talked about in our previous presentation. So if we can go back to page 6, it's the one with the target. Yep, there we go. So we've got social development as the green circle on the outer ring. And it's addressing the underlying causes of social issues through upstream approaches that promote and maintain individual and community wellness. This includes opportunities for employment, income, adequate housing, access to education, and other supports that promote social and economic inclusion. So again, actually, I'm going to use the same example with Saugeen Valley. They're providing accessibility to their lands, and it's free, so it's accessible to everyone in the community, which is amazing. Prevention. Apply proactive strategies to known and identified risks that are likely to result in harm to individuals or communities if left unmitigated. Right off the hop, your involvement with safe communities is the prevention piece, as well as I'm sure off the top of your heads, you probably already know a ton of different preventative services and tools that you already have in place for Wellington North. Social development and prevention are the areas we want to focus on. The other two areas within the levels of intervention are risk intervention, identifying and responding to situations of acutely elevated risk, and mobilizing immediate interventions before an emergency or crisis-driven response is required. An example of this is a situation table. Emergency response. Circumstances that require intervention by first responders, for example, police and paramedics, or other crisis-driven services in the human services system. For example, homelessness, eviction, mental health crisis. Not specific to the Township of Wellington North, but just recently the partnership with Loyola House and now the Holiday Inn Express to help with homelessness across Wellington County is another thing that we're doing across Wellington County that again helps keep Wellington County safe and well. The framework recognizes that it is beneficial to maximize efforts in the outer rings, as I mentioned, the green and blue rings, to reduce harm to individuals who have their needs met before the situation escalates into a crisis, and to prevent increases in demand for more costly downstream interventions with police and other emergency response systems. So if we can move to page 18, 17, might be 17. There we go. Yeah, preliminary, I moved back one, sorry, 17. Oh, yeah, sorry, 19.
This is 18. Where do we want
Yeah,
to be?
that's it. Yes,
Okay.
that's the one that I wanted. Thank you. Aside from our leadership table, we also have our action groups that are following our preliminary issues for attention. Currently, we have on and off road safety, falls, mental wellness, and accidental poisonings. This year, we would like to add a forum or action group dedicated to creating an action plan to improve the safety of vulnerable road users, as well as increasing safety protocols within organized sport organizations, and coordinate efforts to reduce agriculture-related injuries. Further, all of the action groups will be supported by evidence to ensure we have a greater impact on the safety and well-being of the residents of the Township of Wellington North and across Wellington County. So these statistics are pulled from the OPP, as well as our hospital room visits and a variety of different, so they're all vetted, and generally speaking, we end up receiving it through our partnership with the Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health. So finally, to briefly summarize what is required over the next 12 months for the Township of Wellington North: 1, attendance and participation at Safe Communities Leadership Table meetings, January, March, May, June, September, and November. Number 2, create and or support strategies for the preliminary issues for attention, page 18. So Karen does a great job at supporting us and making sure that the information that we have provided her at the meetings, and she puts it out to everybody and council as well. So thank you very much. And number 3, your representative is encouraged to join or champion an action group. And finally, submit your annual update in December 2022. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay. Questions for Christine? Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Christine, for that presentation. Hello. Just wondering, all the action items that we have or that you've listed, is the funding coming from us, like just as a separate or ourselves as a township, or funding, or is it a partnership with the county?
Basically, there's no funding requirements from the municipality or any of the municipalities at this point. There could be, like, depending on if there is actions that we may want or priorities that Wellington North kind of identifies as areas that they want to focus on or you want to focus on, you may want to put money into a program that would support safety and wellness across Wellington North. But as it stands, I'm personally not asking you for money.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Dan, go ahead. You're muted, Dan.
In a while. Anyway, thank you, Christine, for the presentation. Very informative. In regards to the slide where it's got the preliminary issues for attention, and we've got there's 4 paragraphs there. Is there examples of a success story, say, to reduce motor vehicle collisions throughout Wellington County? Like, are there examples of what has actually happened to reduce that, or reduce the instances of falls? Like, are there success stories that?
Over the last few years, yes. Well, with the falls, actually, because there has been so I guess so we can't say that definitely the work that we're doing has prevented, like, I guess it's very difficult to determine whether the actions that we've taken have prevented falls, but knowing full well how much our falls action group, for example, has done, and how many people they've reached out to, and how many, so for example, they have a checklist that they have kind of distributed throughout Wellington County that's in all waiting rooms as well as pharmacies and such, to actually take home and go through with their families to ensure that falls are not happening in their homes. And so I can say that through the Victoria Order of Nurses and the partnerships that have been made, that more people, more older people are obviously engaged in activities that would prevent injuries from happening. For every 50 hours of exercise, a fall is prevented. So people that are engaged, like over the last 10 years that Safe Communities has been in place and the Falls Action Group has been in place, there's been a lot of participation. So you can't really, it's kind of tough, right? So that's the only, but the Falls Group, I can also, and also working with like the OPP and working with the county surrounding the transportation plan and working together in order to put infrastructure in place to prevent injuries on our roads. You know, there's all these different things that have been happening over the course of the last few years, obviously, that are hopefully preventing injuries, right? So
yeah, no, that's fine. I just wondered if there was a way that you could measure, you know, success, really. I mean, you obviously, the group has put a ton of work into the whole program, but there has to be some sort of a measuring stick to make sure that it's working,
Mayor
I
Lennox.
guess.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's the amount of people that we have reached out to. So for another example is obviously through our Safe Communities Day and how many children have actually attended our Safe Communities Day at the Martin Fieldhouse, as well as the last 2 years, we've held the 2 virtual Safe Communities Days, and we have had over 600 students that we have taught about safety and injury prevention across Wellington County. So it is about who we've spoken to, how many people we've gotten the information out to, and has there, like, do we know if a child has been safer because of the information that we have provided them? Not necessarily, but we do know our numbers and how many people we've reached out to. So in that, I think that's a great statistic to have as well.
Okay.
That does prove to people that we are doing stuff.
Yeah, no, okay, thank you very much. Well explained.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Christine? Okay, I don't see any more. So again, thank you, Christine, for your presentation, and we look forward to hearing the next steps. Certainly, we recognize that community safety is an important part of making this a great and continuing to make this a great place to live. And so thank you for the efforts you're making in that regard.
Thank you, Mary Lennox.
Okay, next up, we're going to make a little switch from the what's posted in the agenda, in that we're going to flip the budget presentation to last, and we're going to invite Andrew Coburn of Coburn Insurance to be our next presentation. So I see Andrew's on the call here. If you could turn your camera on, Andrew, and join us, that'd be great. Welcome.
Thanks, Mayor Lennox. Good afternoon, Your Honorable Mayor, fellow councilors, township personnel, and members of the public. My name is, as stated, my name is Andrew Coburn of Coburn Insurance, and I appreciate the opportunity to come in front of you and present the proposal for Township of Wellington North 2022-2023 insurance proposal. Just to provide a bit of an update on the insurance industry as a whole, what we've been experiencing the last couple of years, to be candid, has not slowing down. The hardening trends that we saw beginning in 2019 carried through 2020, did not stop as we proceeded through 2021 as well. The market's difficult. There's not a whole lot of room for negotiation. There's reduced capacity with increased rates as a whole. The three primary coverages that were affected were consistent year over year, were property and general liability. Those are the 2 primary factors. And then as a tertiary, there was cyber insurance as well that we will touch on here today. So with regards to the property insurance, we've seen property insurance now rates rise for coming up on 3 years in a row. This has to do as a this is directly related to the capacity which insurers are. So with reduced capacity, insurers will increase their underwriting guidelines, put up barriers, and increase rates as a result of it. We're seeing property rates continue to be in the 15 to 20% for favorable risks. If loss ratios or in non-target industries, we're seeing loss ratios go much higher than 50% actually with property rates. So doubling down on what's proven to be difficult, the property portion of the industry is just the rebuilding costs, and we've seen a drastic increase in labor and material throughout so what that's doing is it's putting quite a bit of pressure on the claim costs when it comes to adjudication processes. So that is not helping when it comes to claims costs as well, which further puts pressure on the property markets. With regards to the casualty, which would be the general liability, public entity, townships, counties, etc., they continue to be highly scrutinized across the board. The results aren't always in our favor. We are succumbed to the spray and pray theory quite a bit. We get dragged into a lot from an exposure standpoint. This has been a really difficult space within the marketplace. Lloyd's of London syndicates are restricting or withdrawing altogether. So there's been quite a bit of jostling in the industry when it comes to the casualty portion. Then with regards to cyber insurance is a relatively new product. This was considered somewhat soft for the first couple of years as the product was just getting to market and sold at the retail level. Cyber insurance is another primary coverage which has been affected this year, and it's been directly resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic, and just reasons for that is it's accelerated the digital transformations of a lot of companies, pushing staff, employees to work from home, which increases the vulnerability of a lot of organizations, and there's been a drastic increase with claims coming from the cyber portion. Cyber alone has doubled within the last year, and at this point, insurers are still trying to find a product that can fit on in the marketplace, which even shows signs of just remote profitability. I don't think that's anywhere close. So I think with very little to no new entrants coming into the marketplace with cyber, it's difficult to even get cyber terms, let alone the renewal. So just with regards to the Township of Wellington North, CFC has been on risk now for years, and a mobile app would need to be endorsed within 30 days post binding if CFC was to remain on risk for the cyber portion. Therefore, with regards to the insurance policies for the Township of Wellington North, there has been no change to any insurance policy. We still carry Canadian Council's liability, which is the general liability, 2 layers of umbrella liability at 20 and 25 million respectively. We still have our property and machinery breakdown policy. We have our fleet policy, comprehensive crime policy, cyber policy, and the annual low risk event liability policy. So there's been no change with regards to the actual policies that the township holds. Therefore, rolling over to the next, Marsh & McLennan's proposal this year, they're coming in at $269,000. Included within the presentation, there's the line-by-line breakdown of each policy and the cost within with regards to each line. This does result, as you can see on the next slide over, this does result in a 16% increase year over year. Again, this is a direct sign of the marketplace. Very little insurers want to get into this space. In fact, many pulling out. Therefore, loss ratios have continued to trend in the wrong way. 16%, believe it or not, is quite favorable in the marketplace when it comes to these types of risks. So the year-over-year comparison, we go from 4%, 8%, 19% was a large increase. We made some changes there to the policy at the policy level last year to reduce the drastic increase last year, and this year we're still handed with a 16% increase from expiring. With that said, due to the market conditions, Township of Wellington North provided instructions to seek terms from another provider coming into the 2022-2023 term to ensure that we were receiving competitive terms from Marsh & McLennan, and that the coverages were where they need to be. We engage with intact public entities, which I'm assuming many of you would, or not assuming, but many of you would recognize as formerly the Frank Cowan Insurance Group. They have a stronghold in this local, in our geographical area with regards to municipalities. So to follow, we'll go over, like to review intact public entities proposal and then break down some comparisons and some differences between the two providers. Intact public entities, their renewal their new business offering would be $264,000. Therefore, at a pure premium level, it's only a 2% difference between the two providers. Intact public entities actually does not have a cyber market for the 2022-2023 term, but we are able, if a switch is imminent, if a switch is favored, we are able to transfer the cyber portion of Marsh & McLennan's policy over to intact public entities. Intact is yet to secure even a market for the 2022-2023 year for their program. So with that said, it's only a 2% difference in the marketplace. This is good. I understand nobody really likes to see increases, especially at the 16% level, but when taken to market, to have another competitor, only come in, $5,000 less, it does show that we are getting favorable terms from a premium standpoint from Marsh & McLennan. With regards to the coverages, from a high level in review, there is no difference between TIV values, which is total insured values per location, fleets. There's really no shining or no drastic differences between the two offerings. The one key note that I think is favorable to the township is Marsh & McLennan's liability insurer has put a total exclusion on all oil tanks over 20 years. I think that's a key difference with regards to the pollution liability aspect of the township's position, is that subject to standard exclusions and conditions within intact public entity does not limit their age for their tanks. That's one thing on the pollution that I noticed. Again, noted here on the comparisons was Intact's proposal does not include cyber. Not a great concern, because if a township is in favor of switching carriers, cyber terms will remain constant between the two programs. Going further here, taking into consideration the premiums first and the coverages, which go hand in hand, to me, I think the primary difference, this has been a lengthy exercise with lots of discussions between the two providers, and to me, the primary difference between the two would be that intact public entity, since they've purchased the Frank Cowan Group, has implemented several value-added services, which I think are something that the township needs to seriously consider as trends continue with the exposure. Intact public entity holds several seminars from a risk management perspective. They're trying to reduce the township's exposure, mitigate damages if there is a claim. A couple notes here that I've mentioned is social media. Social media is a large one. I think everybody has social media accounts now. They hold social media seminars on how to reduce your exposures. They have a contracts and waivers seminar, which then we have access to their legal team, their paralegal full-time. There's also abuse and volunteers. So every township would have several volunteers that also provide additional risk there to the township as well. So they hold several seminars, which I think at no cost, which is an incentive for the township. But the primary differences that I noticed there that I see going forward is obviously reducing the risk, reducing the exposure, but taking advantage of some of these value-added services. The primary one that I have noted here is the asset valuation. Since the pandemic, I think we're all well aware that rebuilding costs, et cetera, and asset valuation becomes a concern with the drastic inflation we've seen in materials, labor. The cost to rebuild things today is just not what they were even 2 or 3 years ago. It's kind of the sad truth. And what Intact Public Entity offers is a free asset valuation. They do have a full-time staff member that comes through all buildings, takes a look at it from a risk management perspective, but also provides the asset valuation behind it. I can't comment for certainty as it's not my primary role as to value assets, but I think something like this would be it's a key differentiator for me. I mean, Marsh is a hired firm, which would cost, I never received back formal terms, but theirs would be between $5,000 and $10,000 to go through all the physical structures and provide a rebuild value on them. I think that one, just based on the schedules provided, I think that's an area of concern going forward for the township. It's need to ensure that all buildings are properly valued. Road risk review is another one. They review policies, procedures within to try and mitigate the exposure again and come up with the best practices procedure. Fleet management, driver training, roads and sidewalks. These are all things that, again, value-added services free of charge that I think can greatly enhance the policies and procedures of the township and reduce the risk overall. And then lastly would be the service standards. Since Marsh and McLennan had acquired JLT a few years ago, it's been well documented that the service standards have drastically changed over the last few years. Response times are not days, they can be weeks, which that just creates a lot of friction. It's difficult. Intact Public Entity, they provide a same-day response and guidance. I see value in that. I see quite a bit of value in that, to be honest. I think services, when we're differentiating between premium, well, there's really not a great deal of premium difference here. Coverages very much at par with the exception of the pollution. To me, it would be my recommendation for the township to consider a transfer to Intact Public Entities just based off of the value-added services and the service standards that Intact Public Entity does commit to. I know it's not it's not a significant cost savings, but to have free value-added services and to have those service standards, I feel as though there's value there for the Township of Wellington North to seriously consider a transfer to Intact Public Entities. That concludes my presentation here for today. I'm happy to. I'm sure there's a few questions I'm happy to field.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Any questions from council with regard to the proposal? Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks, Andrew. It's never easy to deliver something like that, especially with an increase like that. So thanks for softening the blow a little bit. This isn't the first year that we've had a bit of an increase. And I know you said last year and you repeated this year that there's fewer and fewer entities that are willing to take on the risk of a municipality. Is this something that we're going to, like, is this a trend? Are we going to have to keep, I guess, is the pool going to start or continue to keep shrinking? And then are we going to see increases almost year over year? Like, is this something that we have to get ready to almost kind of become a normal for us? Or not that you have a crystal ball or anything, Andrew, but it just
No,
seems
good,
like
good
as
question.
there's
I
fewer
and I
people,
appreciate the question.
price is
Yeah.
gonna go up.
Sorry, Councilor McCabe. Yeah, good question, and I'm happy that you fielded it. To provide some context to it, you know, when a hard market comes, insurers are going for profitability. I think they are experiencing profitability now. There's starting to have some whispers within the industry about to provide some revenue growth now. So that's a shift from the profitability standpoint now to a growth standpoint. Once the growth standpoint comes in, you might see it soften up a little bit. With regards to municipalities, I cannot see this changing. I cannot see more, because based on the historical, with the rates that as a municipality, like a township would get versus say, you know, a lot of other commercial entities out there, the rates are just such drastically lower that I can't see there being much room. I don't think it's going to go soft again, to be honest. With that said, you know, I think with Intact Public Entities, it's a managing general agent of whom Intact, which is Canada's largest insurer, is a primary stakeholder in this account. I cannot see, their rates have always been historically stable. I cannot see these types of increases coming year over year. But again, the market would determine that at the end of the day. But I do think that we are nearing the shift from profitability to revenue, which is growth.
Thank you, Andrew.
Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, Mayor Lennox, just maybe further on Councillor McCabe's question. Council will recall, and you're going to see this information coming again, the increases that municipalities are facing, it's not uncommon. It's not common to just us. So one of the items that AMO is reviewing and has reviewed for a number of years is the idea and the impact of joint and several liability. And again, approaching the Attorney General's office to review that and give consideration to proportional liability as opposed to joint and several. Andrew made reference to this early. In a lot of claims, legal claims, municipalities are named in those claims, and a lot of times we are the deep pockets in those type of claims. If it's a trip and fall, a sidewalk issue, we end up, typically municipalities are the ones that end up covering the liability around that. So this has been a topic for close to a dozen years with AMO. And I know they haven't had a lot of success with previous governments, but it is going to come back to this council. You'll see a piece coming up on the next agenda around the joint and several liability. That isn't the only factor. Andrew's touched on a lot of the other factors in terms of there are limited options as it relates to municipal insurance, but the joint and several liability is something that we should support as a municipality with other municipalities across the province, because it is a major issue and does have an impact on premiums. So thanks, Mayor Lennox.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Comments? I have a quick question, Andrew, and I just want to make sure I clearly understand. Like, you were contrasting the two suppliers of insurance, and you mentioned the cybersecurity was really only offered by through the Marsh Group. So is that a coverage that we can carry the same carrier that we currently have to the other
Yes.
insurer?
Yeah, good question, Mayor Lennox. Yeah, so basically, we did take it to market, but the most competitive terms. So when we look at a policy line level, we'd call it, when we break it down on an individual policy line, each one of these are separate policies by different carriers, spread out. You know, there could be upwards of a dozen carriers beneath these programs. The one carrier specifically is CFC Underwriting out of London, England. They are the most competitive still, despite over 100% increase. The next closest terms that I received was from Coalition Insurance, which is a new startup, and they were at 13,000. So in the township's best interest, if a transfer to intact public entities is at play, then we can broker transfer from CFC out of the Marsh and McLennan program to the intact public entities program, and intact public entities would endorse that. They would support that transition.
Okay.
Transfer, sorry, transition.
Oh, okay. And so I guess the other thing, when you change insurers, sometimes you, I mean, it's competitive. I'm not concerned about that, but it's, you know, are we giving up a track record with an insurer in terms of our claims history and so on when we switch teams, so to speak?
Great question, Mayor Lennox. No, that is a good question. I had this conversation with Mr. McNabb, and you know, I'm glad you asked that. At this point, I think JLT, when the market was soft, you know, when we won the account, I think 9 years ago, it's been good, and it's been loyal, and it's just due to market conditions that in the request that it went back out to market again. It's never in anyone's best interest to be going to market every 2 or 3 years, because you get negatively selected against, and underwriters can, you know, there's loss runs, like there's certain loss run reports that are out that you have to submit with submissions, and at that point you can be negatively selected upon. With that said, after being with a carrier for that many years, no, I don't see any adverse effects on this, because at this point, we're not direct with the carriers themselves. It's going through managing general agents. So because there's only 2 or 3 offerings out there, the managing general agents are the ones that actually market it with the markets beyond that level. They will negotiate and procure contracts each year based on their agency's performance. So at this point, I'm not concerned that if the township decided to transfer, I don't see any adverse effects at this point.
Okay. And then I guess the other question I have is, we've run into this in the past, that our contract usually comes close to matching the calendar year. And here we are in the new year. Are we still within the window that we can make this transfer without penalty, I guess is the way I would put it?
Yep. Excellent question, Mayor Lennox. Yes, so this was discussed as well. You know, and perhaps I should have went over that, so I apologize. But I received a 30-day pro rata extension on all policies included within. Basically, you know, the difference from a high level, there's a short rate cancellation and a pro rata cancellation. So if Marsh & McLennan's carriers didn't offer a pro rata extension, we would be subject to a short rate cancellation, and we would be paying fees. But at this point, if we're within the 30-day window from December 30 or January 1, we would be able to transfer without any penalty. We would just have time on risk back to those insurers based on expiring premiums and coverages. So basically, to just kind of put that again, so it might be a little more clear, is we would pay 30 days back to Marsh & McLennan for the time on risk for our current coverages that we have right now, and our new renewal date would be February 1st going forward. Just to give you a bit of light, the reason why here we are again presenting after the renewal date, which is always a concern, and I don't, you know, I don't prefer that, to be honest, is we received terms quite a while ago from intact public entities, but unfortunately, terms were not received in time from Marsh & McLennan. It's nice to have these conversations 30 or 60 days prior to, not 15 days after, or 10 days after, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't mean that as any kind of, you know, shot in the process. I just was concerned that, you know, it's always difficult to arrange these things around the end of the calendar year because everybody's busy with other things. So
yeah, understandable. I mean, That's why I think at the end of the day, there's not a great cost savings here. From a coverage standpoint, I don't think we're at what the market bears. I think at this point, it's predominantly a decision based off service levels, which I think we've experienced and have. We've experienced it for a couple of years now. And also I think that being proactive on a lot of things such as asset valuation and taking a look at the procedures, and it only reduces or mitigates the exposure that we have and be better as a result of it. Like I think if a transfer, which I think a transfer is in the best interest at this point to take advantage of these, I think we're better off as years go on going forward.
Okay. So I've got a question. I see Adam's picture has popped up here. So I got a question for him. I noticed we have a recommendation in our agenda here to accept the proposed insurance coverage, and my assumption is that involves the switching carriers. Is that correct, Adam?
That would be the staff recommendation at this time. Yes, Mayor Lennox, that we would entertain the switch to Intact as the carrier of choice for 2022-2023 for the township.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, well, I guess you're off the hook, Andrew. Thanks very much for coming and presenting that to us. It's good to have some new information to look at, so I appreciate that very much.
No, thank you. I appreciate everyone's time. And again, appreciate everyone's time. I wish I could deliver much better news, but I guess, I guess as a broker acting in the township's best interest, the marketing of the account, it is justified now based on the terms from Marsh and McLennan. So I do appreciate everyone's time. Again, any other questions or concerns? I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Karen, from a procedure point of view, do you want to deal with this recommendation right now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North accept proposed insurance coverage for the Township of Wellington North for the year beginning January 1st, 2022. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Lisa, seconded by Sherry. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, again, thanks, Andrew, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Okay, I guess we're on to our next presentation. Adam, you've already got your up on the screen here, so I'm just going to turn it right over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox, and if you'll just indulge me as I do some screen administration here. Trust that's showing now from a presentation perspective.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. Pleased to be here to present the 2022 budget as prepared by staff on behalf of the Township of Wellington North. Looking at the levy funded operations for the township into 2022, staff are proposing a 4.86% budget increase. This is being proposed without contributions to or from reserve and reserve funds or contributions to the capital program. This represents an increase in levy proceeds of $254,000. And as you can see in this slide, is segmented into assessment growth of 1.48% and levy increase of 3.38%. I've prepared the operating budget comparison between 2021 and 2022, stripping out key items to provide a neutral comparison between years. And of note, there are no contributions to or from reserve and reserve funds. No contributions to the capital levy have been entertained. And lastly, revised interfunctional transfers for 2022 have been implemented. However, no material differences are being proposed. Looking at the operating budget by FIR category and beginning with the general government segment, you will note that the council segment increase is largely attributed to a new line item being added to support continued volunteer engagement of $10,000. And administration is up sharply to accommodate an additional resource to support asset management initiatives and 2022 election costs, which when fully loaded will be supported by a transfer from reserves. When looking at the protection services segment, Wellington North Fire Services expenses are up to support specialized software licensing costs, contract dispatch services, and increases to interfunctional transfer allocations. Conservation Authority budget includes budget inputs received from our CA partners and assumptions for 2022 anticipated costs. Protection, inspection, and control revenues are up based on anticipated increases to permitting revenues and partially offset by increased wage and benefit costs associated with the onboarding of a new building inspector. And bylaw enforcement costs increases are largely driven by anticipated expenses relative to the shared services agreement with the City of Guelph for 2022. In these next three segments, you will note that the roads expenses are up marginally and are largely driven by contracted expense increases for dust control, marketplace cost pressures for materials, and township-wide cost pressures, most notably, and as we just discussed, insurance. Parks and recreation expense increases are largely driven by interfunctional transfer allocation changes, wage and benefit increases, program cost pressures as it pertains to cleaning and maintenance, and township-wide cost pressures, again, insurance and hydro. And lastly, when looking at the planning and development segments, you'll see that there's no material changes being proposed. So in aggregate, you will note that the total anticipated operating expense increase of $254,000 or a 4.86% operating budget increase. Building on the operating budget discussion, reserve and reserve fund net transfers are being proposed to maintain alignment with policy and to fund 2022 election requirements. Year over year, net taxation reserve contributions are down due to the elections transfer and reduction based on the 2021 organic growth figures. However, they are up overall due to the reduced debt servicing costs in the wastewater segment and additional contributions from the water services segment. So being proposed for 2022 is a fully loaded 2% net tax levy increase for the Township of Wellington North. This is inclusive of net transfers and contributions to the capital program. As you can see in this slide, the contributions to the capital program from the levy is up 3.6% from prior year, however, down from 2020 levels. And the distribution of the tax levy dollars remains relatively static when considering the service level verticals. In terms of distribution of tax dollars collected by the municipality, this slide shows that the municipality retains approximately 38 cents on every dollar collected and remits the remaining 62 cents to both the county and education boards servicing the residents of the Township of Wellington North. When looking at the average assessment on various property types within the township, the upper table in this slide demonstrates that these remain relatively static from prior year, while also showing that the proposed tax levy increase impact would have on a typical tax bill when considering the township only portion. So, for example, a typical residential single-family dwelling would be subject to an increase of $24.71, a farmhouse up $18.62, an associated property up $19.83, a commercial property up approximately $64, and an industrial property up about $130. On the bottom table, you'll see that when looking at an average single-family dwelling's full tax bill, you'll see that on average, a typical property owner can anticipate a total tax bill of approximately $3,400, which represents a $57.51 increase over prior year, inclusive of township and draft county budget changes. In terms of historical trending, the township from 2014 through 2020 had seen increasing property values and conversely decreasing tax rates for residents. However, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and the pause of the provincial reassessment scheduled for 2020, township property values have plateaued. This has resulted in a need to increase tax rates to support increased operating expenditures, and this is a trend which is likely to continue with the province maintaining current assessment values, which are predicated on January 1, 2016 values for the 2022 and 2023 calendar years. Looking at the 2022 capital plan in aggregate and in comparison to prior years, we see that the total program being proposed is very similar to last year in scale and down sharply from the high water mark of 2019. However, distribution between the service segments is slightly different. From a funding perspective, you'll note that contributions remain relatively static compared to prior year, with the largest variations coming from funding from grants down sharply year over year, prior year carry forward up over prior year, and the utilization of federal gas tax dollars also up from prior year. You will also note that the 2022 capital program has an unfunded amount listed, which is largely driven by the Wells Street project and is contingent upon development pressure and contributions to these works. Looking at the 2022 capital program in detail, the council directed projects are largely carried forward from 2021. The Wells Street extension remains contingent upon development influence, as previously mentioned. The Arthur BIA streetscaping is largely complete, but still requires allocation of project costs, which are still trickling in. And the Mount Forest Pool project cost represents detailed design only, and its funding source has been identified as the tax rate stabilization reserve based on previous budget discussions. Incomplete 20 and 20 IT initiatives are being carried forward into 2022 and focus on continued IT initiatives for the township, namely contingency dollars to facilitate recommendations from the IT service delivery review conducted in 2020. Development-driven projects are all 2021 carry forwards and are being again presented herein for council information, but remain funded from prior years. The administration group is proposing 2 projects. Mount Forest Downtown Wi-Fi project is a straight carry forward from 2021, and the work order management system is being proposed for 2022 to facilitate continued maturation of the township's asset management practices as recommended in the 2021 asset management plan update. Building and property are proposing 2 new projects for 2022, those being the acquisition of a pickup truck and the replacement of the flat roof of the Gene Weber Reading Room. Wellington North Fire Services is proposing 4 projects. 2 are continuations of multi-year projects previously approved by council, the bunker gear and the fire hose replacement projects, and 2 new projects for 2022, those being site planning for the Mount Forest Fire Hall and the acquisition of a new pickup truck. From a fleet perspective, we see 2 carry forwards, those being the 2007 Volvo and 2010 pickup truck replacements. These items have been ordered but have not yet arrived. And the remainder of the projects are those being proposed for 2022 and include the replacement of the fuel tanks at the works yards, installation of dash cameras and radio replacements for fleet vehicles, and other replacement equipment purchases. 3 new bridge projects are being proposed for 2022, those being on Side Road 3 East, Line 6, and Side Road 13. Reconstruction design projects continue for 2022, but also include 2 new additions, those being Fergus Street North between Durham and Birmingham, and Preston Street North between Smith and Domville. And full reconstruction projects for 2022 have been identified as Domville between Conestoga and Preston, and Queen Street East in Mount Forest, for which the township has secured a connecting link grant to partially fund. Additionally, the township has submitted an application for the continuation of Smith Street and Arthur, and will be contingent upon grant approval. 2022 works on this project would be limited to detailed design, with construction slated for 2023. Gravel-based rebuild projects have been identified as Side Road 13 and Side Road 9 West. It is anticipated that these 2 projects will require 3 years to complete. However, what is being proposed herein is only the 2022 estimated contributions. And the 2022 rural resurfacing program is being directed to 3 projects, those being Side Road 5 West, Line 12, and Side Road 7 East. The 2022 urban paving program is comprised of 6 projects, including London Road North, Albert Street, Birmingham Street East, Church Street North, Durham Street East, and Preston Street South. And other transportation services include a mix of carry forward and new projects for 2022. The pedestrian safety measures, Mount Forest Drive turn lane, and works yard upgrades are carry forwards from 2021. And the newly proposed projects are the sidewalk construction projects for Princess Street and bordering the Victoria Cross Public School, 3 assessment studies to aid in the township's asset management initiatives, and the assessment and concept design of a new works yard in Arthur. Sanitary sewer capital works for 2022 include contributions to the previously mentioned engineering design projects. Additionally, contributions to the reconstruction projects on Queen Street East and Donville, as well as some independent sewer projects, including project works being suggested at the treatment plants and pumping stations presented by Aqua, as has been the case in prior years, and a couple of studies. Those being the wastewater treatment plant blower study and the Mount Forest wastewater treatment plant re-rating, rounding out the sanitary capital ask for 2022. Waterworks will also see contributions to the similar engineering design projects previously discussed. And contributions to the reconstruction projects on Queen Street East and Donville are also being proposed for the waterworks segments, as well as some independent water projects carried forward from 2021, including the water supply study in Arthur, the allocation of costs pertaining to George and Smith Street in Arthur, and the Mount Forest standpipe rehabilitation, along with some new 2022 projects, including the replacement of a valve maintenance and vac trailer, a water meter study, and the acquisition of a new pickup truck. Parks and Recreation segment is suggesting the continuation of a number of multi-year projects, namely signage, trail development, the Brent Barnes Memorial Skate Park, the Arthur Ball Diamond safety netting, and the completion of the Red Clay Diamond in Mount Forest. Being proposed for 2022 are the rehabilitation efforts at the Arthur Community Center, for which a grant has been submitted through the Federal Green and Inclusive Community Building Program and will be contingent upon a successful acceptance to that program. The Campbell DeVore Park accessible playground, the replacement of an ice resurfacing machine for Mount Forest, the Mount Forest playground surface replacements, Mount Forest Fairgrounds enhancements, and the development of a trails master plan. So in aggregate, the 2022 capital program being proposed is $15.2 million. Worth highlighting while on the topic of the 2022 capital program is the gap that the township is attempting to overcome with respect to its owned infrastructure. As depicted in this graphic on the left-hand side, you will see that from 2018 through 2020, the township has made significant strides in investing in its infrastructure. An annual spend of $11.6 million on core assets has been spent, and this has continued into 2021. However, the township's most recent asset management plan would suggest that in order to service current and planned infrastructure to facilitate growth, an annual investment of $16.5 million inclusive of operations and maintenance expenditures is required. With the 2022 operating and capital programs presented within this 2022 budget, the township has signaled its continued desire to address the infrastructure gap and invest in infrastructure used by the residents of the Township of Wellington North now and well into the future, with a proposed investment of $16.3 million on core assets, again inclusive of O&M expenditures. So when looking at the 2022 budget from a P&L perspective, we see that revenues for the township in 2022 are budgeted to be $18.13 million and up approximately $300,000 over prior year. This is largely facilitated by increases to the levy and user fees and partially offset by a reduction in transfers from reserve and reserve funds. And when looking at the expense side of the ledger, we'll see that expenditures of $13.26 million are being proposed, up approximately $378,000 over prior year, and again, partially offset by a reduction in transfers to reserve and reserve funds and the capital program to balance the budget. And as you can see at the bottom there, the total tax levy change is 3.48% or 2% on a net basis. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. We have any questions or discussion with regard to the budget presentation? Steve, go ahead.
Excuse me. Thanks, Mayor, and through you. Adam, just going back to the Mount Forest ball diamonds with the 130,000, is that not funded by 100,000 from a private donation?
Through you, Mayor Lennox. Yes, the red clay diamond I trust you're speaking of.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, we did receive significant donations towards those works. So from a funding perspective, you would see that would come through from a donation perspective and not funded through the levy into account.
Sorry, I thought that was saying that it was, we had to put that kind of money in, but when in reality, it's only really actually 30,000, like just for upkeep and stuff, so. Okay, and again, yeah, thanks to the Donald family for that contribution.
Okay, any other questions, comments, discussion? Sherry, go ahead.
So I'd just like to thank staff and council for working through the budget process as quickly as we have been. I think this may be the earliest we'll approve a budget since I've been on council. Just wanted to again talk about the contentious line that's always in the budget, and that's fleet. I just want to ask again that we improve our logo and cresting on all of our new fleet. I continue to ask, but it doesn't seem to happen that I can see anyways. These vehicles are moving billboards within our community. I'd like to see them clearly identify the use of the vehicle, no stealth branding, and ensure that the benefits of vehicles are appropriately being recouped by the township. Yeah. Other than that, I think the budget looks good. I think 2%, the work that's been done to get it down to 2% is fair.
Okay, thanks. Sherry, any other questions, comments, discussion? So we do have a budget bylaw to deal with that in the bylaws section of our meeting later on,
Yes,
which reflects the presentation here today, Adam. And just to be clear, we did have the very similar presentation with the same results back in December. And as nearly as I can tell, there's no material changes between now and then, just a few changes in the presentation. So thank you for that. And I'll just go around and see if anybody has any other further comments or questions at this point.
I don't,
Okay,
but
so-
I would thank staff and especially you, Adam, for the presentation.
Okay, I guess that wraps that up. So again, thank you, Adam, and the whole team for putting that together, and for all the cooperation from everybody to get it to this point. And we'll look forward to delivering on those things that we've planned for in 2022. So thanks very much. Okay, next we've got a public meeting coming up. So we'll recess from our council meeting in order to do the public meeting for planning matters. I have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North recess the January 10th, 2022 regular meeting of council for the purpose of holding a public meeting under the Planning Act for a Vila Investments Limited zoning bylaw amendment, housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment, and Mary and Paul Boland zoning bylaw amendment. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. All those in favor? That's carried. So we're recessed from our council meeting. I'll just switch paperwork here. And I'll call the public meeting for planning matter to order. And I'll go around council again in terms of disclosure of pecuniary interest with any of these applications on today's agenda. I have none to declare. Councillor Yake?
No.
Councillor Hearn?
No.
Councillor Burke?
No.
And Councillor McKay?
I have none, Andy.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start off with Vila Investments Limited is the owner applicant in this case. The land subject to the proposed amendment is legally described as Parks Lot Q and R, Survey McDonald's, Mount Forest, Part Lot 2, Concession West Owen Sound Road, Divisions 3 and 4, Geographic Arthur Townships. Sorry, being Part 1 on Reference Plan 61R-7881, Township of Wellington North. The property is approximately 31.1 hectares in size and is currently vacant. Again, in the shown on the map attached in the agenda. The purpose and effect of the proposed amendment is to rezone the subject lands from industrial site-specific holding. So that's HM1-26 and HM1-27, and natural environment site-specific NE28 zone to site-specific low-density residential R1B, low density residential R1C, medium density residential R2, and high density residential R3. Highway commercial C2 and open space OS zone. This rezoning is a condition of draft plan of subdivision 23T-13002. How is notice provided for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and as well mailed to the applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property and posted in the Wellington Advertiser on December 16, 2021.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, could you give us a rundown on this proposal, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. I am Jessica Rahim from the County of Wellington Planning Department. I'm here representing the local municipality planning staff. So this application before us today is to amend the zoning bylaw to implement the draft approved plan of subdivision in Mount Forest, which was previously draft approved on October 2nd, 2018. For 411 residential units, a mix of singles, semi-detached, and street townhouses, as well as a commercial block with additional residential units above. As part of the draft approval, a condition was placed on the subdivision that the appropriate zoning is in effect for the proposed subdivision prior to final approval. So we're here today as the first step in the applicant's clearing this condition. So my report to Township was to provide an overview of the zone amendment application that was submitted by the applicants. And today we're here to facilitate the public meeting for that application. Further, this statutory public meeting will provide opportunity for the community and area residents to ask questions and seek more information from the applicant. So as mentioned, the subject lands are currently zoned in industrial site specific with a holding as well as natural environment site specific. And in order to implement the draft approved subdivision, the applicants are proposing to rezone the subject lands to a low density residential zone, site specific low density residential zones, medium density site specific, and high density residential site specific zones. So a number of these are looking at reduced lot frontage and reduced exterior side yards for those site specific zones. There is also the site specific zone along Bentley Street that is asking for 18 meters frontage. This was a request as part of at the subdivision stage. So that's just being put in place to allow neighboring residents that asked for that previously that those lots will remain larger with the 18-meter frontage now and as well as in the future. And there's also a site-specific highway commercial zone, which would be requesting for 18.5 meter height. So this is to accommodate additional residential units on top of a commercial on the main floor there. So following this public meeting, staff will finalize the technical review and address any comments or concerns raised by council or members of the public today. At a later date, an amending bylaw will be brought to council for consideration. And if the amending bylaw is approved by Township Council at this later meeting, then and the appeal period has been met, then there are a number of conditions placed on the draft plan of subdivision that will still need to be addressed before any construction can begin there. So a few following items that will be brought back to council would be the sewage allocations for the subdivision, holding removal on the land. So the site-specific zonings that are being brought forward today will still have the holding. So provided that those provisions are adequately addressed, then we can remove the holding at a later date, but that will have to come back to council, as well as the development agreement for the subdivision. So staff would just like to note that engineering design details are also underway in order to address any stormwater management, traffic and grading as well. That these will be reviewed at staff level and before any subdivision agreement is brought forward, then those will be addressed. And that's all for my presentation today, but I'm here if council or staff or members of the public have any questions, and I do believe John Cox is also here representing the applicants.
Actually, I have moved Mr. Cox, Mr. Kerr, and we've got a lot here today, and Tony Agnera into the meeting representing Vila.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let me just go through a couple of details of the process here, and then we'll let them have some time for a presentation. Also, I think it would be worthwhile if either someone from the proponent or Jessica at some point, if we could just kind of, this is a project that's been on the go for quite a length of time. I know in terms of the land transaction, that's over 10 years ago. So I think it may be good to just review the process to date with how we've got here. And it's been, I think you mentioned the draft plan of subdivision is 2018 date on it. So we've been through this, but it would be good to get a refresher just to make sure that we have all the history and the background details. So I'm not sure whether John, you can provide that, or Jessica. It doesn't matter to me. It just would be good to review that. Before we do that, though, just ask if there's any further correspondence been received in respect to this application.
Yes, received comments today. Peter and Elizabeth Mogensen. They don't object to the rezoning. They have concerns regarding flooding on their property at 140 South Water Street and Harris Street. The entire body of their written submission will appear in the minutes. And also Edward Duncan Boxell, who does not object to the rezoning. He owns 3 lots adjacent to Lot R running along Harris to Bristol. And he has concerns in the spring, the portion of the subject lands that is represented as Lot Q, touching Lot R near the highway, can be very wet. It would be beneficial to check the source of all this underground water before proceeding with the installation of infrastructure for future development. And additionally, we have 2 people who have registered to speak, Barb and Tom Schellenberger and Elsa Mann.
Okay. All right. The bylaw will be considered at a future council meeting with regard to this application. Any persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And before I open the floor for questions or comments, I'll turn it over to the proponent. John, are you doing most of the talking on this?
Yes, I am.
Project?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Okay, so I'll turn this over to John Cox for his presentation this time.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, staff, members of the public. We have Tony Agnera and John Kerr online as well to answer questions that may come up through this process. And yes, I had actually prepared a bit of background information about the history of this application, so I will sort of try and quickly run through it. I know my involvement in the project started at the end of 2007, 2008. So, and I know Tony doesn't like to hear that because it means he's been paying me for a long time on this. But the draft plan evolved over a period of time between when Vila acquired the property in, I believe that was 08. At the time that the lands were acquired, and as mentioned earlier in this meeting, they were intended for industrial development and had site-specific industrial zoning assigned to the property. The township itself actually initiated the official plan amendment for these lands, and they were redesignated to the combination of residential and highway commercial that is presently still on the land. And that official plan amendment got approved in around the end of 09 or at the very beginning of 2010. We worked for some time on a draft plan for the property, and that was submitted at the beginning of 2013 and received draft approval in 2018. So even that is, I guess, a little over 3 years ago. Since then, there's been quite a bit of work going on through our engineers to address the various conditions of draft approval. I will touch back on some of those later in my presentation, and work is well advanced on some of what is required. And as Jessica mentioned, ultimately, this is not even yet the end of the process, but because that involves those studies being finalized, accepted by the township, and a subdivision agreement being entered into with the municipality that will enshrine all of that. However, those studies were well enough advanced that we were comfortable that nothing was going to necessitate a change in the draft plan, and therefore comfortable with proceeding with the zoning amendment application. Some of the details of the draft plan I think were addressed earlier, so I won't dwell on that. What the zoning that will be put on the property is essentially some site-specific zoning for the particular properties. And even back when we were working on this draft plan prior to its submission in 2013, we worked on what we viewed as more current urban development standards that were common at that point in time in other urban centers. And that dealt with, as was mentioned earlier, some smaller frontage lots, some reduction in exterior side yards, that sort of thing. And that was the basis on which the plan was developed, and certainly the basis on which the draft plan was reviewed. Specifically, so some of the site-specific provisions then include a reduction of exterior side yards from 6 meters to 4.5 meters on virtually every form of the development. And just to confirm, we have worked through some examples of how that would work for daylight triangle link to make sure that we can meet necessary daylight triangle requirements for the intersections within the development. There is a recognition site specifically of about 10 18-meter or 60-foot lots along Bentley Street, across from some existing residential uses. And I know those owners were mentioned earlier as being in attendance for this meeting. So that zoning is being site specifically recognized there and was part of the draft plan that was developed for the property. The semi-detached lots are basically 50-foot lots, which will be divided into 25-foot lots, and or 18 meters and 15 meters and 7.5 meters respectively. And the street townhouse sizes are 6 meters. Even when we were developing the draft plan, some of what was developed as provincial policy and requirements for certain density had been set out in the provincial policy statement and adopted into the Wellington County official plan. So even at the time, we barely met the requirements for the amount of residential development on the property. And that was done through basically the introduction of the semis, but primarily also the street townhouses on the property. That kind of addresses the site-specific aspects of the residential use. For the commercial use, we are proposing, and this is really new to earlier considerations of the project in terms of any prior discussions we had directly with the municipality. But we are suggesting that it would be appropriate to zone the commercial blocks for mixed use. And that's coming from for a number of reasons. One is that the market for commercial property has changed drastically since this project was first considered and the official plan was amended back in about 2009 or 2010. In terms of bricks and mortar commercial development, it's just not occurring the way it was. And even that was prior to COVID. And of course, COVID has been an even further blow to that. So the owner would like to retain some flexibility. It's a large amount of commercial land, almost 3 hectares or about 7 acres. And he's concerned, obviously, about the viability of that property, especially since large scale commercial uses are not permitted, meaning the likes of a grocery store, for instance. There are limitations on what is permitted within the highway commercial. And the largest sort of use probably is a pharmacy. And although they tend to be a mixed use now as well with some grocery and some commodity type uses, it's still not comparable to a larger retail user. So that's one reason. change in commercial development requirements that's being anticipated. The second is that there's been an increasing emphasis on supporting mixed-use development along major transportation corridors. And that's supported by provincial policy through the provincial policy statement, and also is part of what is allowed on highway commercial in the county official plan. We're suggesting then having the provision for additional stories of residential to be added above the ground floor commercial. And I would note that ground floor commercial is still required. This will provide an opportunity for some additional affordable housing potentially in the municipality. It's too early for us to be able to advise you on whether that will be of an ownership or a rental form, but certainly either of those could potentially be entertained on the property. So that is the basis of the request. And the only other comment I would have about the proposal to put what we recognize as a higher scale form of development in this particular location. We also know that that's well removed from other existing adjacent development. In fact, its neighbors will be essentially the other lots within the Avia proposal. So it's a chance to do something that approves some additional use on the property without having to worry about existing neighbors that are in immediate close proximity to the area where the increased density could occur. Lastly, as a general update, John Kerr, as I mentioned from GM Blue Plan, is present on the call, but our traffic study update is nearing completion. That original work had been done several years ago, and it will look at providing a guide to some of the possible phasing in the development. We acknowledge that the development agreement with the municipality will in all likelihood require some sort of phasing agreement. And we think that will be guided to some extent by the results of the traffic study and when certain improvements have to occur on Highway 6 and at the Bentley Highway 6 intersection. Stormwater management, as I understand it from Mr. Kerr, is well advanced and has been essentially approved by SVCA as well as BM Ross. And generally, work will continue to finalize these items and bring them back to the township as part of finalizing the subdivision agreement for the municipality. So with that presentation, myself as well as Mr. Kerr and Mr. Banyera are available to answer questions from council and to any concerns that the public may have about the proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, John. So we'll open the floor for any questions or comments from the public. And Karen, you did mention we have some registered guests,
Yep.
Barb and Tom Schellenberger. Are they?
Yeah, they registered first. So there's Barb right there.
Hi, Barb, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Lennox and members of council. It's good to be here. And Tom is with me, but I'm the spokesperson, so that's what you get. And then I looked back when you said about some history, because my file goes back to year 2000 when it was originally rezoned. So I did have some data to collect for today's conversation. And I'm glad that the owner, the applicant, and other respected agencies are there, because I didn't see anything in the agenda package of other than the planner report for comments of the submissions. So, you know, with all the thoughts that have been going on in this household in the last few days, I thought, well, how do I speak them to you? And so I just did it in point form. And so I'm going to just start chatting. And interesting, this day, the Safe Communities was a delegation, and there was some Safe Communities issues there. We know that how people live today, parking is an issue on the street. And I just wonder about, you know, parking on both sides of the street and fire trucks and how everything will be safely provide services to the community. So I don't know if there's going to be no parking on one side or anything like that, but I just want everyone to be safe. And also when people are in the community, I want them to be able to walk on sidewalks. So I don't know if the sidewalks are always on one side in residential areas or how that flow happens. And it was really good to see in the budget that Director of Finance proposal put through that there is a master trail plan happening. So I think a lot of these things are before council, and just that we have great staff that can bring it all together. And then I thought about, well, what about Bentley Street? You know, like is there going to be sidewalks there? And we all know through COVID, all the people that have been using the trails and getting out there, you know, there's just the increased usage of it. And I just kind of think about that as well. And then, wow, all the site-specific proposals that are being asked for in this rezoning. Well, I guess Mr. Cox did explain it, because some of our standards within our zoning bylaw are more of rural prior to places to grow in current provincial legislation. So I'm understanding why they're asking for them. I don't necessarily agree with them. However, with these side yard setbacks, I'm really thinking that we're going to be very, I understand the site triangle, but the people are really going to be tunneled. You know, there's just going to be building sides on everything, you know. So I feel that that might be not so desirable. Thank you for recognizing the 60-foot frontages on Bentley Street, and that's really directly across from our place. But you know, I drive up my driveway and I think, oh my goodness, where are my headlights going to go? Are they going to go in the person's house across the street right into their living room? And I do want to have, you know, a good community. So I don't know where the curb stops are going to go for their driveway, or where the best place for my lights to go, but I just wonder if there's any consideration to that. And then I noticed all the other 50-foot lots, or I went by 50-foot, I went by feet, not meters. So I know that meters were mentioned. So then Mr. Cox, he mentioned the semis. And so I just wasn't quite sure where the semis, and like R2 zone provides for semis, triplex and fourplex. And I get that they're going to be around the commercial blocks, but I just kind of wondered if the street A, if on the south portion, east side, if those are going to be single family dwellings or semis. So that was just a little bit of a question. And then I read the report and I saw about those 5-story commercial building, you know, main floor commercial and then 4 residential. And I thought, goodness me, does our fire services, can they adequately service that? Wellington North Fire Services? I'm not sure. And then I just kind of had to do a little bit more reading in my research. And then I noticed in the Wellington North Community Growth Plan that they are talking about in the downtown Mount Forest core area to permit 5 stories so that residential can take place. And I think that's good planning to have that in your core, because we do want people living, working, playing as much as they can. So, but if it was determined in our growth plan just to do it in the core, why should we be doing an exemption in an area that's going to be highly visible for the traveling public as they come into Mount Forest on number 6? I think to myself, you know, what should they see? What, you know, what makes our community welcoming and desirable? I'm not sure that 5 stories is it, but those are the difficult decisions that have to be made. So I did notice on the 2013 conceptual draft subdivision, and it was very hard to see it in my 2018 decision for the subdivision, But going along the number 6 and then to the residences that are onto South Water Street, I believe it's all berming, trees. And it goes all the way around to the open space, if I understand the drawing correctly. And I really think that natural buffering is better than a fence buffer. And so I'm hoping that that's what's going to be shown in the agreements later on. And then I got a little selfish and I thought, well, I wonder what the streetscape is going to be on Bentley. Will there be trees there? So I don't know if that's what the standard is for municipal requirements for subdivisions. So then I thought, oh, well, here's another resource I have. I went into it and it was about the subdivision agreement. And then I was thinking, well, is 5% going to the township or are they giving some land? And then maybe that's the open space. Those are things that I know staff and planners and lawyers and things will look after. But should it be cash, I was hoping that it would be dedicated to parks and trails in the immediate area versus putting into the big pot. Sometimes the pot thing disappears. So in that open space that's labeled on the drawing, you know, I'm hoping that it's for all generations, young and old. I do quite, I know in Wellington North, in Arthur Village, we have some new exercise equipment for older adults. I think that is really awesome and is engaging all to be fit and well and be the best we can in our communities. And then I noticed also on the plan that there is blocks, I'm going to say onto Harris Street, which is unopened, and there's another street, Bristol Street. So I imagine that block is for foot traffic versus vehicle traffic. And then how those routes are going to fit into a master trail plan, I really don't know. But if we have a plan and then work the plan, I think that that's going to support the decisions that are made. And we can easier budget for that in the future. So then, I wrote something about Bentley Street, the condition of Bentley Street. I'm sure the Director of Public Works can speak about the areas this in the last several months about the mud and slop and whatever. And I just don't, those are other people's. Then I also came across the active living document. And there is a map for, it's the County of Wellington Active Transportation Plan. And there is a map in there for Mount Forest as a proposed, a conceptual drawing. It goes from Highway number 6 along South Water Street, and it continues over and it meets up with Mill Street. And I think that that is something that can be considered to keep our biggest asset is the Saugeen River. And I think that can keep people off of roads and into a discovery for open and green space. I think I have covered my pages, but I have a little bit of curiosity in Barb. She's wondering about the phasing of it. I guess the servicing is going to come from the town across the river. So an assumption would be that that area is going to be developed first. Maybe someone's able to speak to it. And of course, I'd like to be notified of any decisions made, but it would even be better to hear council's conversations up to making any decisions. So that's what I have for council. Tom, did I cover everything?
I think so.
Oh, goodness me. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Barb. John, do you want to try to address any of those?
Wow, okay. I can certainly start to make some preliminary comments. And I'll just I made some notes, try and go through them quickly in the order that they were raised. Parking on the streets hasn't been, to my knowledge, any detailed discussion on that as yet. And sidewalks, I guess, fits into this category too. I do believe there was some earlier information that indicated sidewalks will be provided at least on one side of the street. The other thing I wanted to note is that we are operating, there was never any consideration of reduced right-of-ways for the internal residential streets here. You're seeing stuff as low as 16 meters, 17, 18 meters in other municipalities, which does affect on-street parking and make it more difficult. But we have stuck here with the traditional 20-meter rights-of-ways on the streets within the development. The trail system, the intent certainly was the linkages of into Bristol Street, Harris Street, would facilitate trail linkages that could access from outside the development as well, and that there would also be potential there for there to be tot lots and that sort of potential use, so that they're closer to some of the actual homes than the main park area. The main park area is going to be partly a natural area leading to the river, as well as some open area which will be available for more active use. And I think there is a requirement as in part of the subdivision agreement, in fact, that a trail plan be part of the approval process for that. And I know some of the work around the stormwater management area has taken that into consideration. So that will also be finalized as this moves forward. And specifically, there was a question about the location of the semi-lots, and yes, there are some proposed on the east side of Street A, where you enter into the development. So council doesn't have the draft plan in front of them, but basically there are two street accesses to Bentley Street. The first one accesses basically the commercial blocks and multiple residential areas, meaning townhouses. And the second street accesses, it will have single detached to the west side of it. And that's where most of the larger lots in the development are located, is in that west area of the development. And a row of semi-detached lots on the one side of that Street A. And lastly, I mentioned phasing earlier, and we know that that will be part of the agreement. We know that it will be driven, at least from a development perspective, and partly by what can be done with within the necessity for improvements to the intersection at Highway 6 and on Highway 6. But secondly, yes, we do anticipate that probably it will make most sense if some of the development is where the services come into the property when they are extended across the river, and also because of where the stormwater management facility is located in the southwest corner of the development. So we do anticipate that some of the initial development will occur in that area of the property. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have a follow-up, Barb? I was going to go to Elsa, but
Just a quick follow-up then, and thank you very much. In regards, thank you for the semis. I get where they are. The townhouses, are they going to be stacked too high, or are they going to be across? And this is my final question.
We're proposing, sorry, through you, your worship. I was jumping in quickly. The layout, at least for the lots, is for conventional two-story townhouses based on the 20-foot wide module. Not the blocks were not designed for stacked townhousing. We're seeing a lot of that these days, but this development was not designed with that in mind.
Thank you.
okay. So on to Elsa. Welcome, Elsa.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. Excuse my mask, I'm at work. Just a few things to follow up. I just wanted it to be a note on record that as some of the things that Mr. Cox spoke to are part of an undertaking, which is filed with the County of Wellington and also with the OMB, that in particular with those lots that front onto Bentley Street, those 10 lots that front onto Bentley Street. I mean, we could split hairs on it. They were supposed to be 60-foot frontages, but they're 59, but that's where we're at as part of that undertaking. just a couple of things in addition to that that I wanted to make a point about, and I'm going to speak directly to council on this as consideration for voting. You have an opportunity with this 72 hectare property, which if you superimpose that over the downtown core of Mount Forest, covers the entire downtown core of Mount Forest. So I want you to understand the scope of this development. And this is an opportunity to make this development a part of our community as opposed to an appendage. And if I think about communities such as there are some, there's subdivision, I'll give an example of Elmira. There's subdivision to the west, northwest part of Elmira, where a very similar subdivision is in place there with, you know, kind of straight streets kind of running like this proposed layout. But there's actually a connecting walking trailway system behind the property. So where the backyards of these properties butt up together, there's actually been some space provided for walking trails and some naturalized area in there. It changes the entire feel of that subdivision to be something where it's a sense of community as opposed to just a place where you house people. So for consideration, I'd like council to think about how else could this development be laid out now so that it serves our community in a healthy way, not just in a way to house people. In addition to that, I am in full agreement with my neighbor Barb's discussion about natural buffering. I think we have an opportunity here with this being a new subdivision to do it right. It's the first thing you see when you come into our community from the south. How can that be laid out in a way that is naturalized and comfortable and welcoming, as opposed to, again, just a commercial subdivision space. I have a question for Mr. Cox in terms of if he could describe for me and for any other public that's on the call what he means by mixed use for that commercial space. Although there aren't any other residents in that subdivision to contest what that space is going to be used for, there are some of us that live there already, and I'd kind of like to know what could possibly be housed inside that commercial space if it's not what it originally was deemed to be used for. The other question I have, I mean, Barb spoke to kind of the condition of Bentley Street, traffic flows and that sort of thing. I mean, not just traffic flows down Bentley Street for people that will be eventually living in this subdivision, but my question is are there numbers to be extrapolated from the traffic studies that are happening since March of 2020, given that our traffic patterns are very different since COVID? And I would like to know, are we taking into consideration that we actually have more traffic in our normal world than we do during COVID? So I'm hopeful that that's all being captured and understood, that that's kind of out of character right now. And I'm trying to think if there's something else I wanted to ask. Oh, the sidewalks piece. I guess if I look at the Places to Grow Act, it talks about, you know, supporting the achievement of complete communities. And again, although we can't, you know, as somebody who moved onto Bentley Street and thought I was moving into an A1 agricultural area, I am now sitting in the middle of a subdivision. That wasn't the intent when I purchased my property and moved there. I understand that anything and any effort that I have is not going to stop this subdivision from moving in, but I think we can be thoughtful and practical and use this opportunity to make a more welcoming and just a healthy community. So how are we connecting these people, these thousands of people? How are we connecting them to our community? Or are we just going to keep them segregated off to the side of our town of Mount Forest? So just some things for council to think on. And I think that's all I had for today.
Okay. Thanks, Elsa. John, did you have anything you wanted to respond to in regard to Elsa's comments?
Perhaps just a couple of very quick comments. I do note that there is some natural buffering. I can tell from the draft plan around the perimeter of the property. Certainly looking at how that can be retained through the grading drainage process is is something that, and perhaps has been looked at. John Kerr may be able to comment on that as well, if he's still with us. I know we had a later afternoon conflict. Mixed use, I should have maybe been more specific. When we say mixed use, what we're adding is residential. We're not changing the commercial uses that were proposed on the property. It's highway commercial. It's the zoning that is permitted in highway commercial currently in the Mount Forest bylaw. And there were some limits put on that when the official plan amendment was done in terms of the potential for large scale, specifically a grocery store is referenced. Any variation beyond that requires, and it's stated within that official plan policy, that a market impact study would be required. So that other than that, the change with mixed is that we're adding residential, not that we're changing commercially what would be permitted on the property. And the ground floor of these areas, it must remain commercial based on the policy approach. John, if you're still with us, can you comment at all on the traffic and as it relates to the update and perhaps where the overall stormwater management is at?
Sure. Thank you, John. I don't know. Can anyone hear me?
We can.
Okay. Excuse me. With respect to traffic, consultant, a third-party consultant is currently underway with updating the traffic study. And we expect their report to be ready very shortly. And as Mr. Cox alluded to previously, that will help our client determine phasing locations and sizes and whatnot. And of course, we'll work together with the municipality, the staff and council on those phases to make sure that we're all on the same page. So that should be through very soon. With respect to stormwater management, that's been reviewed and approved in principle by the Conservation Authority and town staff, as well as consultant at BM Ross, and is currently under review at the Ministry of Environment for a C of A, or an ECA, I guess they call it now. And Ms. Mann, with respect to your questions about buffering, certainly it's been our approach as to retain as almost completely all of the vegetation in the western portion of the park block and the northwestern portion of the stormwater management block. So there won't be any major intrusion into those woodlots at any means. Other than that, I mean, hedgerows on the perimeter, of course, will be retained wherever possible. I don't believe there's much of any existing vegetation on the north side of Bentley, but if there's some to be benefited from, certainly if it fits in with the driveways and the trees and whatnot, then it'll be retained at the same. I hope this answers questions, but I'm here, to answer any other technical questions you may have, which I'm sure could also be answered by your Public Works director or your consultant at BMS.
Okay, thank you, John. Elsa?
Thank you very much for answering those questions. I appreciate that. One last question. This might be more for you, Andy. Just from what I understood from Jessica's preamble was that some of the details of these things. So I'm assuming today is really just to vote on the change of zoning, and that a lot of the details will happen by staff. Some of the details around stormwater management and impact on neighbors and that sort of things. Where, as the public, where do we go if we still continue to have concerns about how implementing this subdivision, building it, and how that might impact neighbors, and how do we mitigate any impact to neighbors? Where do we take those questions?
So yes, let me just talk about the process, where we are in the process a little bit as I understand it, and I will be corrected by staff if I've gotten the story wrong, because this has been drawn out over a long period of time. Sometimes it's hard to remember all the steps in the process, but there's been a couple of public meetings I know that I've been involved in, one with regard to the plan of subdivision, where there were significant comments from neighbors and so on that were recorded. And I believe you were part of that process as well, Elsa. at that time. Certainly those comments are not gone. They are still part of the record, and staff will be working with the applicant. This particular thing is just the rezoning, which is just allowing this type of use of the property. We will move to site plan agreement and development agreements with the applicant, and largely staff lead that process and bring it back to council for approval as required. And a lot of those comments that have been made previously, or will, you're free to continue to make comments. I would forward them to township staff, and they will work with the proponent with regard to that. It is this is the public meeting. Whether you were part of the public meeting, as I recall, with regard to the draft plan of subdivision, a lot of the issues that we dealt with at that time were things related to, site plan, stormwater management, those types of things, which aren't really part of the draft plan, but were dealt with at that time. So those things are still very much a part of the process. And so if you have continued or new concerns, please submit them to township staff, and we will work through the process as we get closer to finalizing this with the applicant. I see Mike has turned his mic on, so I probably missed something. Mike?
Mayor Lennox, just to add, you covered it quite well, but just to add, as it related to the initial public meeting and draft plan approval. So draft plan approval came with it a number of conditions. Elsa and Barb, this I think relates to both a lot of the questions. There are 31 conditions that were assigned to the draft plan approval, and a lot of them address a lot of the concerns that you guys have raised. So those are on record, and the developer and his consultants have to satisfy each one of those conditions in order for the subdivision to move forward. The subdivision agreement itself is kind of a next step as well, and I think that's been referred to by both John Cox and by Jessica. It gets into more of the specifics as it relates to engineering design. All of those things get hammered out as part of schedules to the subdivision agreement. So, and not to put the onus back on council, but the onus, it goes back to council. They approve the subdivision agreement. Staff works with the consultant, works with the developer to come up with the subdivision agreement, but council at the end of the day is the approval for the subdivision agreement. So it will come back before it's approved and before any work starts on the site outside of what may be a pre-servicing agreement, things of those nature, they happen as well. But just to kind of hammer home the fact that the conditions really reflected a lot of the conversation that came out of the initial public meeting back in, as we've talked about, it's a bit of a history lesson. Thankfully, some of us were here and remember those things and make sure they don't get lost, the conditions themselves. One of the conditions was a reflection of the undertaking also that you have with the developer. So just as an example.
Okay, I don't think we have anyone else registered to ask questions. So let's go back to council and see if they have any questions or comments at this point. And just before we do that, though, just in terms of the process, council will not be voting on this bylaw today. This is just a public meeting. We'll come back to a future council meeting with a report from staff to get to that stage. Questions or comments from council? Dan, go ahead.
Just a comment, I guess, in regards to Elsa's comments is that I guess we really, we have an opportunity for this development when it, if and when it moves forward, to make sure that it does fit into the community and that it's not just, 400 units that are just going to be on the edge of town, and it's really doesn't look like it fits. I think we have that opportunity, and I think that, and I hope that the developer will take that into account. This is a large scale development, will change the whole dynamics of the entrance into the town of Mount Forest. So I think I really do hope that the developer takes into account that there's an opportunity here to really make this a nice looking development that enhances the entrance and the whole viability of the community. So I really hope they take that into account.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Steve, go ahead.
Just a quick one, and I don't know who can answer this. Maybe Matt Aston, you can answer this. The entrance off of Highway 6 onto Bentley. I know we've chatted to the MTO before. Is there going to be a turn lane or anything? I know it's been going on for a little while, and forgive me if I don't remember. I just kind of wanted a quick reminder, if you don't mind. Matt, I see you're on video. If you don't mind addressing that, I just can't remember where we left off with the MTO there.
Yep.
Go ahead, Matt.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. So Bentley and Highway 6 is within the MTO's jurisdiction, and I think John mentioned that the developer right now is working on a traffic impact study for the MTO. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty about that. Right now, I think it does not show a turning lane, but ultimately that traffic impact assessment will be provided to inform what goes on at that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah, I just have a question with regards to the natural environment site-specific zoning that's being asked for. I'm just wondering with the environmentally sensitive area on this property, can that not be left? Or could that be left?
Undisturbed, is that what you're asking, Councilor
That's
Burke?
correct, yes. Could that be left undisturbed? I just think that it could provide surrounding properties some of the comments that we've heard, not necessarily today, but previously, is with regards to water. And I just think it might make a better natural buffer, which we've also heard comments today on.
Who would like to field that one? Mike?
Council, or through you, Mayor Lennox, just to clarify the question, is the question whether or not the dedicated lands coming to the township could be flipped with where they're noting the stormwater management? The stormwater management is a requirement. They obviously need an area where they can address the stormwater management needs for the subdivision. I'm just trying to better understand the question so we can hopefully direct it to the consultant.
Okay, no, that's not my question. It's not with regards to stormwater management. It says here that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment will rezone the subject lands from industrial site-specific holding. There's letters and numbers, I'm not going to read all those, and natural environment site-specific NE-28 zone. Can we not leave that? Do we have to amend that portion of the property to have some sort of development move forward? Can that not be left? My understanding is there's 100-foot buffer around that property, on some of that property that is sensitive environmental.
John, you like to take a stab at that?
I'm going to take a stab at that. Through you, your worship, that buffer, as I understand, and that the establishment of that buffer goes back to before my involvement even in the project, but that was a buffer because what was proposed on the property was industrial development. So it's not an area of natural environment in the sense that there were features within that area that needed to be protected. It was an area that was being set aside as a buffer from proposed industrial development to the neighboring residential area off of South Water Street. So no, the subdivision design as it has unfolded over the past several years is not retaining that buffer. However, to go back to a couple of the earlier comments, the hedgerows around the perimeter of the development, as Mr. Kerr indicated, every effort will be made to maintain them. And the area to the rear of the west end of the property toward the river, where treed, is being left in a natural state. And there is some open area there that's part of the larger park block too that will be suitable for active recreational uses. But what is natural to the greatest extent possible is staying natural. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sherry.
On the property, it has a red boundary outlining the total size of the property. Can somebody tell me where the natural environment site-specific zone is on this property that they're asking to have rezoned?
The current, under the current zoning is what you're asking.
Correct.
Okay.
Jessica, do you have the existing zoning map handy?
I do have, I was just maybe.
What about the county GIS map? Does it show?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm on right now.
Can you share your screen?
Yeah. All right. Okay. Can everybody see that?
It's starting to come up.
Okay. Oh, I think I froze as well.
It won't load for me.
I don't see anything either.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
okay. So yeah, so this is our Wellington Explorer mapping. So you can see, so this is approximate area of the subdivision. So you can see here the NE-28, so the site-specific NE zone is proposed over where the parkland / open space and the stormwater management is. And then I do believe this is the buffer area that we were asking about before that was put in place to buffer the industrial lands from these residential lots that you can see in along here. So the proposed subdivision, so the rezoning, it looks like this buffer is being removed. The lots abut right up to the adjacent property. And then this area, I don't have exact mapping or overlay. Yeah, I don't have the overlay of the subdivision to show exactly where it lines up, but it does look similar to where the stormwater management in the park area would be, is maybe a little bit further over this way.
Did that answer your question, Sherry?
Yes, Mayor Lennox, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from council? Okay, I'm going to ask a question. I think I already know the answer, but just want to acknowledge the letters that were sent in with correspondence around the drainage issue. I know that there, at the time of the draft plan of subdivision, there was some solutions talked about to aid the neighboring properties with drainage issues. Just wanted to make sure that's still in play at this stage of the game. Mike, go ahead.
So Mayor Lennox, I'll maybe start with this, and maybe either John Cox or Frank Vanderloo's also on the call. So yeah, throughout the conversations with the developers and their consultants, they've been very understanding of the concerns raised by the properties to the north along South Water Street as it relates to existing drainage and stormwater concerns. So that's been paramount as it relates to the design. From a staff perspective, we're fairly confident that what is being proposed is going to help mitigate the issue, but some of the issues pre-exist, the development pre-exists everything. So the idea that what is being proposed is going to correct all of the existing issues, I don't want that to be assumed. It's going to mitigate it. It's going to make it better than it is now. But I think we need to be clear as it relates, and council's been down this road another times as it relates to drainage issues. There's certainly the development and the developer know that they cannot make issues worse as it relates to adjoining properties, and they've been very forthcoming and willing to have conversations with us to try and mitigate the concerns from the adjoining property owners. And that's what we've worked towards, and that's in place as it relates to the design itself. But I don't want the assumption to be that we have gone to the developer and said, you need to fix the issues that have existed for 200 years on the property. Water flows in a certain direction, and we all know that, and they're doing what they need to. It's difficult to find an outlet because some of the adjoining property owners aren't open to that conversation, which is their right. They don't need to be. Some of the property owners on South Water Street should maybe consider alternate solutions as well, whether it's a municipal drain, things, and with those items have been raised with them. So the short answer is we're making every effort, and I believe the developer and their consultants are making every effort to mitigate the impacts of stormwater on the properties to the south of the development, and that's what we're working towards.
Okay, thanks, Mike. That's kind of what I expected, but thanks for Dan, go ahead.
So Mike, are you saying that existing property owners may have to find a solution themselves?
So what I'm saying, Councillor Yake, through you, Mayor Lennox, is that what is being proposed as part of the design of the development, the subdivision, will improve the situation. To what lengths or what expectation the existing property owners have around that, I don't know. But it will be better than it currently is and has been historically.
I see Frank has popped up. He probably has some information he can share with us.
Yeah, if I may, I know John Kerr could speak to this as well, but I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that as part of our detailed review of the engineering submissions GM Blue Plan has been making, they are capturing all surface runoff from the development. So even rear yard areas that abut the backs of the South Water Street properties, they're actually, installing rear yard storm sewers to capture all that water. So most of it's being captured and directed to the stormwater management pond that's proposed. There's a little bit of property close to number 140 South Water Street and others towards Main Street where the backyards, because of grading, cannot go to the swim pond. And they put a lot of effort into trying to get an easement across some properties, but that fell through. So right now they're looking at, and we have to finish the review of the last submission. They're looking at the storm sewer and some ditching going down unopened Harris Street and Bristol Street to direct that runoff to a suitable outlet. So again, they're intending to capture all runoff from the subdivision and direct it to a suitable outlet. So it's going to cut off a lot of the catchment area that's currently going across South Water Street properties. But what's going to happen is at this time, it depends on phasing when some of this is going to benefit the South Water Street properties. So it still could be years down the road before anything is actually implemented as part of the development that would benefit the South Water Street properties.
Thanks, Frank. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I think we'll draw this application to a close for today. There's clearly more work that we have to do in this project, but we'll move on to our next application today.
So Mayor Lennox, sorry to interrupt. It's Mike, just to clarify for those who are interested in the zoning bylaw itself, the intent is for it to come to council at the next meeting. So I know that others have asked about, what happens next. The zoning bylaw for council's consideration is planned to come to next meeting of council, which is January 24th. Jessica, that's, I'm on the right track.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we will be working with John and addressing any of the comments that came up today, but yeah, it'll usually be the following meeting. If it doesn't make it to that, if we're still trying to figure out smaller details, it will definitely be within the next meeting after that.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, if anyone watching wants to see the discussion around that zoning bylaw amendment, it will come to a future meeting, probably the next one. Okay, so we'll move on to our next application. In this case, the owner applicant is the Township of Wellington North. This is just for some housekeeping zoning bylaw amendments. Location of the subject land. The proposed amendment affects all lands in the Township of Wellington North. Purpose and effect of the application or the proposed amendments provide for township initiated housekeeping amendments to the comprehensive zoning bylaw as itemized below. Please note this is not a complete list and more information can be obtained at the township office. For 1, general typographical and mapping corrections. 2, add and update definitions, including clarifying the definition of a stacked townhouse. 3, remove and or amend site-specific exemptions for expired garden suites, redundant restrictions, and general adjustments. And 4, removal of redundant holding provisions in various zones and added a blanket holding provision under section 7.3. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to the applicable agencies and posted in the Wellington Advertiser on December 16, 2021.
Okay, Matthew, welcome. Turn it over to you.
Perfect, thank you. And through you, Chair. So before you today is a zone amendment for a zoning bylaw, housekeeping to clarify regulations and mapping, improve and refine regulations and correct any typographical inaccuracies. So today is simply a public meeting and an opportunity for both council and the public to provide comments. The final bylaw will be available at the most likely the next meeting or the one following if there's any major issues raised. So the Wellington North bylaw has gone through 4 previous housekeepings with the last in 2018. This particular housekeeping was on the lighter side with most changes coming from mapping corrections and enhancements to the readability of the bylaw. So I'd like to highlight 3 notable changes. The first being the introduction of a stacked townhouse definition and associated regulations. So planning staff are recommending stacked townhouses be permitted as of right within the R3 zone under the same provisions as the cluster townhouses. So an additional regulation was added to permit a total of 12 units for the stacked townhouses. So the existing maximum number of units in a row would remain at 6. Now with the opportunity to have 6 units above. The maximum height provisions have not changed. Therefore, the streetscape perspective, would have little to no change. So the second notable change was done to the standard holding provisions in a number of zones, which spoke to ensuring sufficient water as well as services were available. So these repetitive provisions were consolidated down to one blanket provision within the holding provision section found in the general regulations. So this change will, like I said, increase the ease of use of the zoning bylaw. And lastly, additional wording was added to the definition of additional residential units, also known as ARU, particularly the detached ARUs. So to clarify that an ARU cannot be a standalone unit, it must be located within an accessory structure. Furthermore, an additional provision was added stating that a detached ARU is to be within 60 meters of the main residence. So this will ensure that ARUs are to remain in the building cluster and decrease potential severances as well. So in terms of next steps, planning staff will take back any comments from council or the public, make any necessary changes, and prepare a final bylaw and as well as a report for council's consideration at the next meeting. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this?
Yes, we received correspondence from the SVCA on January 5th. They have no objections and they would like to be notified of the decision or any appeals.
Okay, thank you. So the bylaw for this housekeeping will be considered at a future council meeting. Persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions or comments. Do we have anyone registered to speak on this application?
No, we
Karen?
do not. No.
So we'll just go directly to council for any questions or comments from council. Anybody have questions or comments?
Okay.
I don't, Andy.
Okay. Well, that was easy.
Sorry, sorry, Mayor Lennox, Barb Schellenberger has raised her hand. She's in as an attendee, so
Okay.
I can move her in. Ta-da.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Barb.
Hi,
Welcome back.
Mayor and Council. I'm unclear in this zone amendment if it's going to be a right for 5 stories or 4 stories above the commercial for all of Wellington North or just in the Mount Forest core.
So can you handle that one, Matthew?
Sure. So through you, Mayor, this housekeeping amendment is just addressed for the stacked townhouses. So basically, as it currently stands right now, within the R3, you're permitted a cluster townhouse, which if you can bear with me 2 seconds, I'll just get the permitted maximum height. But like I said, that height will not change. The only difference will be basically from a structural composition. So now instead of having essentially a 2-floor townhouse under one ownership, you'll have one townhouse owned by basically myself, let's say, and then Mayor Lennox can live above with me, and he'd have his own unit. Like I said, the height has not changed, so it's essentially, that's why I mentioned from a streetscape perspective, nothing will be changing. So
as it relates to the townhouses, it's just like 2-story configuration. I can't remember the number, but it's intended to be 2-story configuration, the same as we already currently have.
correct, yes. So I pulled out the maximum height at 10.5 meters, which isn't changing.
I think I made an error. In this amending bylaw, there's nothing about the 4 stories above commercial.
No.
I'm sorry for taking your time. My apologies.
No problem at all. Any other questions or comments in regard to this housekeeping amendment? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll draw this application to a close for now. Again, we'll be revisiting this when the bylaw comes forward. And we'll move on to our next application. This owner applicant is Mary and Paul Boland. Land subject to the proposed amendment is described as Part Lot 14, Concession 2, with a civic address of 9131 Concession 2. The property is 40 hectares in size, and the location is shown on the map in the agenda package. The purpose and effect of the proposed amendment is to rezone the subject lands from agricultural A zone to site-specific agricultural A2 zone. This application is seeking to rezone the retained agricultural portion of the property to prohibit any future residential development. This rezoning is a condition of severance application B77/21 that was granted provisional approval by the Wellington County Land Division Committee. The consent will sever 1.8 hectares rural residential parcel with an existing dwelling and a garage. A 39.5 hectare vacant agricultural parcel will be retained. Additional relief may be considered at this meeting. How was notice given for this public meeting?
Notices were mailed to property owners within 120 meters and as well mailed to applicable agencies. Signage was posted on the property on December 15th, 2021.
Okay, thank you. Jessica, I see your shining face. Are you taking the presentation on this one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. If anybody noticed, I did change rooms because my son is home from daycare. So hopefully trying to hide up here from him. So the purpose of this zone amendment is to prohibit future residential development on the retained agricultural portion of the subject lands. As mentioned, this was a condition on a consent application that was granted provisional approval by the Wellington County Land Division Committee in November of last year. We have no objections to this zoning amendment. Both the PPS and the county official plan provide for surplus farm dwelling severances, provided that the agricultural lands are rezoned to prohibit future residential development. And we've attached a draft zoning bylaw amendment to our report for council's consideration today.
Okay, thank you. Has any further correspondence been received in respect to this application?
No, we have not received any further correspondence. I would just like to point out when we pass the bylaw that it will be amended. There in the bylaw that's posted in the agenda, it talks about there are 2 sheds on the retained agricultural portion on page 3 under the explanatory note. And in fact, there are no sheds there. So the bylaw will be passed as amended.
Okay, thank you. So the bylaw will be considered at the regular council meeting following this public meeting. Persons wishing notice of the passing of the bylaw must submit a written request. And I'll open the floor for any questions or comments. And I see we have Jeff Buseman here, who I assume is the agent for the applicants. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor Lennox and council and public and staff. I think the application has been explained quite well by yourself, Mayor, in the introduction and also by Jessica as the planner. Again, it's just fundamentally this is a surplus farm resident severance, and the application is to rezone the retained lands to not have a dwelling. Everything's in order. There's support all around. So I'm open to any questions if there are any.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Do we have anyone registered to speak in regard to this application? Karen?
No, we do not.
Okay. So then I'll open the floor for to council for any questions or comments that council may have.
I don't have any, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Anybody else?
None here.
Straightforward.
Okay, so we'll move on to adjournment then. So a recommendation that the public meeting of January 10th, 2022 be adjourned at 4:49 p.m. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. that concludes our public meeting. We'll move back to our council meeting now. Okay, we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North resume the January 10th, 2022 regular meeting of council at 4:49 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Dan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we're back on. We'll deal with the zoning bylaw from the last application, the Bolin application. And the recommendation will be that bylaw number 008-22 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 6601 being zoning bylaw for the Township of Wellington North be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. So this is that bylaw, as Karen referenced, that as amended.
As amended by removing the reference to 2 existing sheds.
Okay. So could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Dan. Any discussion, questions, comments? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to adoption of the minutes of the council and public meeting. We have a recommendation that the minutes of the regular meeting of council and the public meeting held on December 13th, 2021 be adopted as circulated. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Steve, seconded by Lisa. Any questions or comments in regard to those minutes? All those in favor then? That's carried. Thank you. Brings us to items for consideration. So let's pull out any items you have that you'd like to have some further discussion on. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like 3B. This is with regards to Arthur's 150th birthday, coinciding with Canada Day this year.
Okay. Any others, Steve?
Sorry?
Keep going.
Okay. 5A is the well exploration.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure which one of either 6A or 6B. I just want to touch on the GRCA budget. That's, I don't know, Karen, which one covers that? I'd like to speak to that a little bit.
Well, the 6B is talking about the transition, sort of what the Jennifer mentioned today, the regulations and dates that they have to meet. So let me just take a look. 6A is going to be 7. Oh, 6B is just attendance.
All right. All right, then I have nothing, Mayor.
Okay. So you didn't pick either of those? Okay.
No, sorry.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I wasn't dropping the ball. Anybody else? Sherry, go ahead.
3A.
3A. Okay, that's the cultural plan.
Yes, thank you.
Any others, Sherry?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Dan or Lisa, do you have any you'd like to pull out?
Oh, I'm good.
They pulled them all.
Okay. So just to recap, we've pulled out 3A and 3B and 5A. Okay. And so we'll deal with all the others. And the recommendation is that all items listed under items for consideration on the January 10th, 2022 council agenda, with the exception of those items identified for separate discussion, be approved and the recommendations therein be adopted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll go back to, I think it's 3A. This is in regard to the municipal cultural plan. And we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report EDO 2022-001 being a report on the Wellington North Municipal Cultural Plan. And further, the council, in recognition of the importance of cultural planning, as well as the continuation of local cultural resources to the quality of life and sense of community across the township, supports the updated municipal cultural plan as presented. And further, the council remains committed to the guiding assumptions and vision of the preserving, promoting, and developing Wellington North's unique cultural resources to build a vibrant and prosperous community as first adopted by council in 2013. I can move her in a seconder for that, please. Moved by Sherry, seconded by Dan. And with that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Sherry, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I just wanted to pull this just because I think that there's a lot of really good information in this report. And to thank all of the folks that completed this survey to help bring the ideas and their ideas to put a cultural plan together. And I just hope that, and I know that this group won't just shelf this this report and this plan. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there to be implemented. So I really look forward to the cultural roundtable taking this document and running with it. And I see Dale's popped up, so I just really want to thank you, Dale, and your folks for putting this together, and just sort of wondering what the next steps are now.
Dale, would you like to address that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lennox, through you, and thank you, Councillor Burke, for raising the report. There is a whole lot of really good information in there, and thanks goes to the Cultural Roundtable and MDB Insight, who led the process to get it to where it is today. The Cultural Roundtable at our next meeting on the 20th of January is actually going to be going through all the actions that are contained in kind of the last section of the report to do some prioritization around what are the really important ones for moving forward. There's a lot of good ideas in there. We can't necessarily deliver on all of them, and some of them we're already working on, but the roundtable is committed to putting a plan together to address the ones that we feel are the most important at this point in time, and to carry that through over the next few years. We're also going to be undertaking a fairly significant, hopefully anyway, a fairly significant recruitment exercise to try to recruit some additional members to the Cultural Roundtable. The individuals who are listed in that report have been on the Cultural Roundtable for quite a number of years, and the majority of them are interested in still continuing, but we need to try to find some additional members. So thank you for raising the report and giving it some attention.
Any other questions or comments? Lisa, go ahead.
Only just to echo a lot of what Councillor Burke has said. We've worked pretty hard on this. Our committee has been very involved in all steps of doing this, and we're going to dive into it at our next meeting a little bit more. And like Dale said, we are always looking for new members, and just touching on that, maybe this is not the right time or even the right place, just to kind of honor the passing of Robert McDonald, a member of our committee, just this past week, I guess it was, someone that I think really grounded us. We're a very grounded committee, I think, anyway, but Robert did it even more, and we're really going to miss his contributions to our committee.
Thanks, Lisa. Any other questions or comments? I'd just like to add that it's been a while since we did this before, and I think we all have ideas about what the culture of our community is. It's really about the feelings of belonging we have to our community to a large extent, and it's sometimes very hard to put those into words. And I'm really glad that we have a way to help define the important features of our township's cultural community, especially as we think about the future growth and new residents that will be coming to join us. It gives them a better flavor of what it is to be part of this community. And I think you know, this is valuable for people that are already here, but this is also extremely valuable for the people who may choose to come and live in our community and participate in what the culture is and help shape what the future of the culture is. So I think it's an intangible thing, culture, but it's really important to how we feel about the place we live. So again, I thank all those involved in creating this plan, updating it, and continuing to develop it. So thanks a lot for that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to 3B. This is in regard to the Arthur 150th celebrations. So recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive report EDO 2022-002 pertaining to the Arthur 2022 150th anniversary of incorporation, and further that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North declares the celebrations to be held from June 30th to July 4th, 2022 as municipally significant and a recognized community festival in order to support the various licensing, insurance, and promotional requirements. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Lisa, and we'll open the floor for discussion. Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Lennox, and through you. And thanks, Dale, for this report. You know, it's pretty exciting to have, I think they call it the sesquicentennial of Arthur. So I think I pronounced that properly, but I've been practicing that all day. With all of this celebration, and hopefully we can gather outside and come together as a community on this weekend. I'm pretty excited to let you know that what the Arthur Optimists have been working on. There's a member, Brent Hurd, and him and Steve O'Neill and the rest of the Arthur Optimists have been working on this and got in touch with me to kind of help them out a little bit. I didn't have to do too much as they've done a lot of the legwork, but they are trying to get the Canadian Forces snowbirds to do a flyover of Arthur. Now they can't do it on July 1st because the snowbirds always fly over Ottawa on Canada Day. So we might have to do it on July 2nd. And they are hoping to get 2 CF-18 fighter jets as well to do the flyover. And Dale, I believe you might have a kind of a letter, if you could share your screen, and it seems odd, but the snowbirds need the municipal council to approve an airspace lower than 500 feet to do a flyover. Now, in my mind, I always thought that was NAV Canada and it was a kind of a federal jurisdiction, but in order for them to complete the flyover, they have a plan, a flight plan, and yeah, they just need our approval to grant them permission to fly at 500 feet or below. So pretty happy to hear that. And I think, Dale, I'm not sure if you have that letter by chance.
Through you, Mayor Lennox. Don't have a letter, but we do have an amendment that we can make to this motion, Councillor McCabe, in order to get that approval. Yeah, as Councillor McCabe had indicated, they do require the local council to approve a flyover at that 500-foot level. I guess that's not normally something they can do. So with council's approval, I'm sure they get all the other NavCan approvals or whatever that's required. But I think that before we get to the amendment, I think that's just another exciting addition to some of the activities that we're going to be excited about celebrating during this time period. A lot of the groups, including the Optimists and the Lions and others, are really getting behind the celebration, and it's going to take the entire community to come together and have a really great celebration. But we're excited about it, with councils approving the amendment that the motion that allows us to do some more planning. We're hoping to do our Shop Local Sidewalk Saturday on that Saturday as well in July. And we're also hoping that later this month we'll bring kind of a committee together of all the groups that are going to be involved. Councillor Hearn and I talked earlier today about the need to try to find ourselves a spokesperson or a chairperson or someone like that to take kind of a lead role as the committee chair. So those are things we're hoping to do later this month. And Karen, did you get a chance to craft a motion that we could maybe add a friendly amendment to the motion that's on the table to get the flyby?
I do, and I also have that letter. Did you want me to put it up on the screen, Steve?
Yeah, if you didn't mind. And again, I can't emphasize enough the work that Brent Hurd and the Optimists have done. So yeah, this is the letter.
So we will put that on our letterhead once council approves it with the details and send it out. But they're wanting permission as low as 500 feet. And so the suggested amendment would be that it's what's in front of you, and then we will add and further that council approve the 500-foot limit on the flyby.
Okay. Who was the mover and seconder for that?
I don't think you've called it out yet.
Oh, did I not?
I think you did. I thought you had.
Well, we can do it now. Let's get a mover and a seconder for this. If I haven't done it, let's get it done.
I can move it, Mayor.
Steve and Lisa. Okay, let's, so is this specifically on the amendment, Karen, or on the original motion?
It'll be the original motion with that and further that added to it.
Okay, so let's continue with any discussion.
I can just show you right there. So it'll be the recommendation as it appears on your agenda, and then you'll be adding and further that the part that's in yellow.
Okay, great. Any other discussion on this topic? Dan, go ahead.
Just, I guess, a question to either Steve or Dale, like, so this letter has to be sent in and then there's an approval process, or have they worked hard enough to know that they'll be able to get them for sure?
I think it's my understanding that they would have to get our council's approval, and then I think it goes into their process for approval as well to make sure that that they're going to be able to appear.
Sure.
I don't know if it's like in concrete yet, Councillor Yake, but this is a part of the process that hopefully we can help firm that up so that it is a flyover on July 2nd then.
Sure, fantastic, incredible idea.
Yeah, I think it was just magnificent, and yeah, it's pretty neat to have, and hopefully it pans out and be pretty wild.
Absolutely.
Lisa, I saw you had your hand up there.
Well, not specific to that, but how can you argue having the snowbirds come over? With regards, I've discussed with Dale, like, we're going to have a planning meeting. We've got a lot of groups. There'll be a fair bit of coordination going on, and I'm involved with a lot of these groups. So I'm just wondering if I could get an invite to that planning meeting too, just so that I know everything that's kind of going on. Or maybe all the council if they want.
Go right ahead, Lisa.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other discussion in regard to this? Okay, so we'll call the motion then, not recommendation as amended. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to 5A then. This is the technical memorandum with regard to the Arthur Well exploration. And we have a recommendation here that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North receive the technical memorandum regard to the Arthur Well expansion update number 1, TW1-21, construction and preliminary testing dated January 4th, 2022, prepared by RJ Burnside and Associates Limited. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. Okay, we'll open the floor for discussion.
Sorry, I brought this forward. I'm just trying to get to the right page, Mayor.
Okay.
Where is it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just had a quick question. I think it was the rate was at 26 liters per second, I think it was. Sorry, I'm just trying to go through all of this. And my only curiosity was that, like, how many houses would that feed, or like what kind of a, I guess, injection of new water would that be for our well service? And is this a possible site, I guess, maybe for a future water tower in Arthur?
Okay, Matt, do you want to tackle that, or?
I don't know who can answer that.
Yep, through you, Mayor Lennox, to Councillor McCabe, and thanks for raising the report, because the report is exciting news in terms of what we have found. Corey will maybe know the numbers a little bit better than I do, but basically when they went through the testing, I think it shows maybe 30 liters a second as a limit, and I think that was basically constrained by the equipment that they were using. So really the report that's before you shows that the preliminary assessment done on short-term pumping rates is very encouraging. And you'll see us coming to council within the next month here and asking for basically the next steps related to this well, which would be some more long-term testing, and then monitoring some of the additional parameters related to the water quality that we're seeing coming from the ground. But if we use the gauge of our engineer, Jim, who's been involved with this, I think he's very excited with respect to what he's found. But as far as number of houses, maybe I would defer. Corey might have a better answer related to that.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lennox. Not certain I could correlate that to number of houses, but certainly those numbers upwards to 30 liters a second is excellent supply as far as quantity goes for a municipal drinking water system. I think our existing wells in Arthur, well 7 pumps at 21 liters a second. Well 8's capacity is 26 liters a second, so right in line with other municipal wells. And again, this would be adding to probably adding to the existing wells at this stage. But yeah, very excited about the quantity, how much water they have found. And I think Matt alluded to the initial findings being positive as far as the aesthetic water quality, which generally, you know, that's the discoloration of water. Initial findings are positive. It appears to be better quality than what our existing wells are. But again, we'll need some longer term testing, which would be a next step to not only measure and monitor that, but other wells in the area, how we affect them, and a whole list of other parameters that need to be tested for you know, as it relates to drinking water.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
Just Councillor McCabe, did you also, maybe I misheard, did you also ask about the potential of a tower on the same site?
Yeah, I just was curious, like, just with the amount of water that was there, it seemed like quite a bit. Is this possible site for a future tower? That's, I know we talked about that in the past.
Corey and Matt can speak to this better, but correlating the well location with the tower location isn't always, you don't always put one with the other. I think what the overall message that we have is that the quantities and the aesthetic appearance and the quality right now is really positive. But in terms of the tower location, it has more to do with height and where it is. Like it's more complex. It's another complicated factor. This is complicated
Right. No,
too,
no,
but
I was just,
yep.
yep. And I was just being curious. I was like,
Sure.
if it's that good, is that a possible site? So, no, that's all good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So I have a couple, and I'm digging back into my memory archives, but when we started into this project, I thought the intention was to find a bedrock well as opposed to an overburden well. And I'd just like to talk about that issue. I mean, it's great that we have good water volume and appears to be good water quality. But I think this is similar to our other wells too, in that this is still an overburden well in Arthur. And I'm just also wanting to talk about the, what's the right word I'm looking for? The security, I guess, of the well, because it's not a bedrock well, in terms of the potential for contamination and that type of thing. So if you could comment on any of those things, that would be appreciated. Go ahead, Matt.
Yep, thanks, Mayor Lennox, and I can take a stab, and Corey can correct me if I remember any of it wrong, but I think the original intent was that we were probably going to dig or drill a well for 300 feet. But while they're drilling the well, part of the process is that they're checking the water quantity that they encounter as they drill. And I think when we got to that 140-foot level, and between 140 feet and 160 feet, they really found the water quantity that they were looking for. And they didn't continue digging, or they didn't continue drilling further at that point because of what they saw. And I think that's fairly typical as far as they're kind of constantly checking as they drill and looking at what they find. So yeah, it's a different location than I think what we were expecting to find, but I think what we found, again, we're relying on like the water engineers and stuff, that they were content with what they found was a good enough well to investigate further, which is kind of where we're at in the process.
Okay. And do I have it right that the other wells are overburden wells in the same manner as this one?
Correct.
Okay. 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 Well, it's good news, that's for sure. And especially if the water quality proves out and we could use that to improve the overall quality in the system, it certainly is a good solution.
It's good news.
Any other questions or comments? The only other question I have is, assuming this proves out as we go through the next steps, how long a process is it to bring a well like this online to the system, I guess? What's the proposed timeline, or what would be reasonable to expect? Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, I had asked the consultant engineer the same question, and he suggested that probably somewhere between upwards to 5 years, probably 3 to 5 years by the time all the approvals and construction, everything else happens. But that wouldn't be unrealistic in that 3 to 5 year range.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this site would require the extension of water main, probably in a couple different directions as well, which we're aware of at that location. So there's some other things as it relates to the distribution system that come into play as well.
For sure. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, did I get a mover and a seconder for this one, Karen?
I ducked out for a minute. I don't know. Check the recording, sorry. I needed a comfort break.
Through you, Mayor, the Deputy Clerk. Yes, you did.
Yep. Okay, thank you. It's been a long afternoon. Anyways, so I'll call the motion then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our items for consideration. Any notice of motion this afternoon? Okay, we'll move on to community group meeting program report. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on this new year?
Nothing really yet for me.
No, me either.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to brighter days ahead for that when we're not all hunkered down in our homes.
Let's hope so.
And with that, it will bring us to bylaws. Actually, maybe before we go to bylaws, I'd just like to take a moment and acknowledge that one of our valued team members is choosing to move on to greener pastures and a new opportunity. Chanda, our HR manager, is unfortunately we're going to miss you, Chanda, if you're with us today. But certainly wish you well in your future challenges, and thank you for all your service to our community. I know Mike's got a lot more details about all the things she was involved in, so I'm going to ask him to just talk briefly about some of your contributions. But I'd just like to extend on behalf of myself and council our thanks to you for all your efforts over the last few years.
So yes, through you, Mayor Lennox, very briefly, there's a long list, but I'll cut it to the chase because I know that Chanda would prefer that I keep it short and sweet. Obviously, yeah, Chanda started with us back in 2017. She was our first HR professional among staff, and with that became a lot of new challenges and new opportunities when she came on board. But just a couple of few things. She was instrumental when we went through some organizational structure changes. She was really at the forefront of that, has obviously led a number of recruitment processes, and is leaving that chore to find her replacement with me, which will probably not be as positive a result as if she was leading it. And one of Chanda's accomplishments was she did develop an employee development process for the organization that she really put together on her own, and it's something that we've implemented in our organization that kind of improved upon an outdated performance appraisal system that many people can acknowledge. So she led us in new directions along the HR road, and certainly I appreciated it greatly from my seat, and I know everybody in the organization appreciated the efforts that she made in making us better. So thanks, Chanda.
Can I just say, yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been my absolute honor and pleasure to serve the municipality, and just wanted to thank everyone who taught me. I was new to the municipal sector, and I couldn't have did it without everyone from the frontline worker right up to the CAO, who was kind and friendly and took me under their wing. It's an exceptional team here, and it's really hard to leave, but the skill set that I've gained here, I'm taking on with me in the new opportunity. And I just want to thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chanda, and best of luck.
Yeah, best of luck, Chanda.
Good luck. They're lucky to have you.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of the agenda. So we have bylaws here. I have a recommendation that bylaw number 001-22, 002-22, 003-22, 004-22, 005-22, 006-21. Is that right, Karen?
22.
22, okay. 007-22 be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that?
I can move it.
Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. Any discussion on any of those? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to our confirming bylaw. Recommendation is that bylaw number 009-22, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Wellington North at its regular meeting held on January 10th, 2022, be read a first, second, and third time and enacted. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Lisa and Dan, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And I'll draw your attention to the upcoming dates, but I'm not going to go through them all today. And we'll move right on to adjournment. So I have a recommendation here that the regular council meeting of January 10th, 2022 be adjourned at 5:25 p.m. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Sherry, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everyone. Stay warm and stay safe.
Have a good evening, everybody.